Chapter 41-46 The Ninth Kalpa Kings desire the birth of a divine medicine? Jian Wushuang's expression changed. When this godly medicine appeared, it caused a huge commotion and attracted many experts. Among those experts who rushed over, some of them recognized this godly medicine and said that this supreme-grade godly medicine can be refined into a divine pill that can increase the chances of breaking through to the supreme being realm. The peak-level ultimate ruler said, "What did you just say?" The ninth Kalpa King's eyes suddenly burst out with a bright light. Both Jian Wushuang and Divine Marquis Qingfeng were shocked. They looked at each other in shock. Supreme-grade divine medicine was rare. In particular, this kind of divine medicine that could increase the chances of an ultimate ruler breaking through to the supreme being realm was extremely rare in the universe. Jian Wushuang was still a ruler of the fourth level, so he was not in a hurry to use the divine medicine to break through to the supreme level. However, it was a different story for the rulers of the ultimate level. That was breaking through to the supreme being realm. This was something that every ultimate ruler dreamed of. Even if this divine medicine could only slightly increase the chances of one breaking through to a higher level, it would be enough to drive all of the ultimate rulers crazy. Just like the ninth Kalpa King, the ninth Kalpa King had always been recognized as the #1 genius in the Divine Life Palace, at least before Jian Wushuang's arrival. However, over the years, the ninth Kalpa King's status in the Divine Life Palace had been getting lower and lower. It was because he had stayed at the level of an ultimate ruler for too long and the Divine Life Palace had given him enough resources and a price, but he had still not broken through to become a supreme. This had disappointed many higher-ups of the Divine Life Palace. All these years, the ninth Kalpa King had been enduring silently. Even though he had comprehended a terrifying killer move like the Divine Kingdom of One Thought, he had never revealed it. This was because he knew that only by breaking through to the supreme level would he truly rise to a whole new level. Otherwise, everything else would be useless. It could be said that among the many ultimate rulers in the Divine Life Palace, the ninth Kalpa King's desire to break through to the supreme level was the strongest. After all, he already had the battle strength of a supreme and had control of the One Thought Divine Kingdom. Once he broke through to the supreme being realm, he would definitely have the battle strength of a top-tier supreme being, and his future potential would be boundless. However, the crucial point was that he had been unable to break through after so many years. Even he himself was somewhat uncertain if it was possible for him to break through and become a supreme martial artist. And now, there was a huge opportunity in front of him. It was the godly medicine that had just appeared. This was a divine herb that could be refined into a divine pill, a divine herb that could increase the chances of breaking through to the supreme being realm. Even if it only increased the chances of a breakthrough by 10%, it was definitely enough to make the ninth Kalpa King go crazy. Is what you said true? The ninth Kalpa King's eyes were burning as he stared at the 5 people in front of him. Of course it's true. Now that the news has spread, I reckon that many rulers have already rushed there. However, it should take some time for that godly medicine to appear. If you rush over now, you might be able to make it in time. The peak-level ultimate ruler said. Let's go. Let's hurry over. The ninth Kalpa King growled in a low voice, and his speed instantly burst out. Jian Wushuang and Divine Marquis Qingfeng looked at each other and followed without hesitation. The Taro ruins were vast and boundless, and many rulers of the universe had been wandering in the ruins for tens of thousands of years. Many places in the ruins had been named. For example, the Fengyang Canyon was the place where the Fengyang Divine Fruit had appeared. The Fengyang Divine Fruit was a rare treasure. However, he did not expect that an even more precious supreme-grade divine medicine would appear in the Fengyang Canyon not long after the Fengyang Divine Fruit appeared. Fengyang Canyon was not far from where the 3 of them were. With their speed, they arrived at Fengyang Canyon in less than an hour. The air above the huge Fengyang Canyon was already filled with people. Countless rulers were confronting each other, their swords drawn and bows bent. The air was filled with the smell of gunpowder. Jian Wushuang and ninth Kalpa King were not in a hurry to show themselves. Instead, they hid in a void and watched the scene from afar. There really are many experts. Jian Wushuang looked at the countless rulers that had gathered in front of him. Almost all of them were ultimate rulers, and many of them were already at the top of the ultimate rulers. There were more than 10 rulers who were almost invincible, like Divine Emperor Thousand Leaves and the ruler Violet Eye. Moreover, they had already shown their faces. Many others were probably like them, hiding in the surrounding void, waiting for an opportunity. The godly medicine is still there. The 9th Kalpa King's eyes shone with unprecedented fierceness as he stared at the void in the middle of the canyon. There was a blood-colored divine medicine that was emitting a unique aura. The 9th Kalpa King did not recognize this divine medicine at all. However, there were so many experts present, many of whom had extremely high attainments in natural treasures or some divine medicine. They were all so greedy for this divine medicine. Clearly, it was true that this godly medicine could increase the chances of rulers breaking through to the supreme realm after being refined into a divine pill. It seems like we're not late. However, there are so many rulers present, including the ruler teams from the Great Void Divine Hall and Blood Sky Hall. It won't be easy to get the divine medicine under the eyes of so many people. The 9th Kalpa King narrowed his eyes. Although he was arrogant, he was not blindly conceited or stupid. The rulers' teams under the major powers of the universe had many extraordinary strengths. He naturally did not fear them one-on-one, but if they worked together, he would have a headache. One had to know that the rulers sent by the top powers of the universe could not be weak. 9th Kalpa King, your old friend, the ruler Silver Rock, is also there. Divine Marquis Qingfeng looked at the hook-nosed youth standing at the entrance of the valley and joked. He was rather relaxed. From the start, he knew that it was impossible for this godly medicine to fall into his hands. Therefore, he did not think about fighting for it. The 9th Kalpa King snorted coldly and did not speak. Jian Wushuang looked at the peak ultimate rulers in Fengyang Canyon from afar and sighed. These ultimate rulers could wander in the ruins for tens of thousands of years without being plundered or killed, so they were not weak. For example, if he went all out, his fighting power could rival that of a top ultimate master. He could even fight with ultimate masters like Divine Emperor Thousand Leaves and Purple Eye Ruler, who were almost invincible. However, such power was obviously not at the top in Fengyang Canyon. Hey! Divine Emperor Thousand Leaves and the rest didn't come? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. Suddenly, he was startled. If you guys don't want this godly medicine, then I'll take it. A sharp laugh suddenly sounded in the sky. Chapter 41-47. 2 more arrived today. I have to say that the 4 Chiba gods are exquisite, and they did find the right time. They were the ones who rushed to the potion first, and they were closer to the potion. After the first wave of attacks from the strong, they burst out again. At this time, the surrounding masters, trying to block them again, have been very difficult. This elixir belongs to us. As soon as we got this magic pill, we immediately left this Taro ruins. The 4 Chiba gods approached the magic medicine as fast as possible, and the magic medicine was close at hand, which made them all have a pleasant smile on their faces. They didn't see. Around Fengyang Gorge, the main masters who had seen them extremely anxious to seize the magic medicine suddenly became indifferent, and even looked at the 4 people of Chiba God King with some pity. Suddenly, a burst of noise came from the void. The 4 gods of Chiba are like hitting an invisible wall. The hurricane figure is stiff. Okay. The eyes of the 4 gods of Chiba shrank in an instant, and they stared forward. I saw a young man wearing a white robe with a big badger embroidered with the word "too empty" on the back of the big badger. I do nt know when he was standing in front of their diffuseness. Holding them all 4. The young man in white robe had a slender Excalibur on his waist. Just standing there, a sharp sword radiated out, and it was heartbreaking. This person's speed. The 4 Chiba gods were all terrified inside. You know, they were obviously the first to leave, and they were also the closest to the magic potion. The person in front of them was obviously moving slower than them, but now they were standing in front of them. Obviously, the speed of coming is obviously faster than the 4 of them. This costume is a person from the Taishu Temple? God Chiba sank. I know him. He is the contemporary Sun Qing Shuzi in the Taishu Temple. Zitong's eyes were dominated by the dignity. Qing Shuzi, Chiba God, Joyang dominated, and Qinan dominated. The Taishu Temple is also a big force in the universe. They will choose a sun every 1,000 chaos periods, and this godson is the leader of the Taishu Temple in this era. Wanting to be a sun is very simple. In the Taishu Temple, as long as any realm can sweep everything and become a contemporary invincible, it is the contemporary god of the Taishu Temple. In other words, the identity of the Qingzuzi was killed from thousands of masters. He is the most powerful man at the master level and has invincible existence. It should be known that although there are many ultimate masters in the vast universe, and some of them are top-notch, they can really be called invincible among the ultimate masters, but there are few pitiful. Like Chiba God and Zitong dominate the two, they are just almost invincible, which means that the distance from the true invincibility is still slightly worse. However, Qingxuzi is recognized by the universe and dominates the invincible existence. His strength is better than Chiba God and Dodo Dojo. Well, what about Qingzuzi? He only has one person, dare to be our way, kill him. Chiba Shenjin's eyes were red, and there was a surging killing in his eyes. To this day, it has long been impossible to take care of so much. The magic medicine is close at hand, and he cannot stop because of a young child. But he did not wait for the Emperor Chiba to take action, and the Qingxuzi who was standing in front of them was utterly cold, and the magic sword hung around his waist instantly emerged from the sheath. Suddenly, a dazzling Jianmang, like a soaring dragon, tore the heavens and the earth, and chopped directly towards the four people who were dominated by Chiba. This sword came out, a sharp sword surged up, breaking the void. In an instant, heaven and earth suddenly fell into an absolute icy cold, breeding coldness. Jian Wushuang, who is located in the void in the distance, suddenly stared at this scene. He felt that the Wu Cry Excalibur he was carrying was actually a muffled sound. Good swordsmanship. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. He was good at kendo himself, and he had a high sense of the origin of kendo universe. Sword skill was also quite good. Naturally, he could see how good Qingzuzi was. And at the moment Qingzi was performing his swordplay, he could still feel that the Wu Crying Excalibur that he was carrying had a faint sense of excitement, and he wished he would now scabbard out of the Excalibur with the Excalibur the last battle. This Qingzuzi has a very high accomplishment in kendo, and he also has a very high awareness of the laws of the universe. There was a flash of excitement in the sword's eyes. In the Fengyang Gorge, I saw the sword of Taishu Shenzi cut out, and it turned directly into an incandescent startled dragon, snarling and severely chopping on the four men of Chiba God. Although the four men of Chiba had formed a legal array before, but after the first wave of offensives carried by many masters according to the legal array, they have collapsed and there is no possibility of reformation now. The same cannot be done for the second time. However, the opponent was just Qingzuzi, and the four Chiba gods did not want to resist passively, but instead tried to repel Qingzuzi. Therefore, the four of them also carried out a violent attack for the first time, facing the Qingzuzi's sword light bombarded. A loud explosion exploded, and the entire void shuddered wildly. Endless divine power swept through, forming a storm that filled the world. And in the middle of this divine storm, how is that possible? The four faces of Chiba Shinjuku all changed dramatically. Obviously, the four were working together to deal with one person, but at the moment Qingzi cut it with a sword, the four of them had an irresistible feeling after the sword. All four were in the same shape cleavage. Not only that, the sword light contains powerful power, but also impacts on their deities. Under this power, Chiba God and Zitong are better dominated. In addition to spitting out blood, it's no big deal, and the loss of divine power is not too much. Compared with the master of Qi Nan, the master of Joyang will be miserable. The strength of the two will be much weaker. Under the sword of Qingxuzi, one was directly cut off one arm, and the other body was spotted on the spot. Defeated. However, after all, they are both special lives. Compared with the ordinary ultimate master, the divine power is much thicker, and they can still withstand such injuries. However, one sword defeated the four of them and joined forces, which can also reflect the invincible fighting power of Qingxuzi. Many weak masters in the surrounding area couldn't help taking a sigh of breath when they saw this scene. Chapter 41-48. The first is more so strong. It's worthy of being a young child. This is too strong. The surrounding masters were all amazed. One sword defeats the 4 top ultimate masters, of which there are nearly invincible existence in 2 ultimate masters. The strength of this young man is really terrible. Sword unparalleled, you are also a strong swordsman. In your opinion, what about Qingzuzi? In the distance, Qingfeng Shenhu looked at the sword, and then asked with a smile. Strong. Jian Wushuang nodded his head and calmly replied. What if you want to compare with this Qingzuzi? Qingfeng Shenhu asked again. This. Jian Wushuang frowned, but followed the same way. If he only understands kendo, he should not be much better than me, and I should have a slightly higher understanding of the laws of the universe than he, but after all, he is the ultimate master. He is much stronger than me in terms of divine power. If he really kills him, he will naturally be stronger than me. Jian Wushuang is telling the truth. In terms of strength, Qingzuzi is already in the invincible level in the ultimate domination. Although he reached the 4th level because of a breakthrough, coupled with a much higher intensity of divine power than ordinary practitioners, with the insight of the laws of the universe, confidence is not afraid of the ultimate dominator. Even when encountering the powerful class of Chiba God Prince and Zitong, Jian Wushuang is not afraid of it, and even if he is confident, he can fight in a battle. However, Qingzuzi has a lot of strength than Chiba God and Zitong. If he fights with Qingzuzi, he will only have the capital of World War I if he can cast the dragon's mystery, burn his divine power, or his talents. However, Qingzuzi has only just cast a sword. Jian Wushuang has a whole card, and Qingzuzi definitely has it, so Jian Wushuang said that Qingzuzi should be stronger. Can be strong and strong, but if you really fight with Qingzuzi, Jian Wushuang will never have the slightest fear. And Jian Wushuang is sure that Qingzuzi can't help him. After all, Jian Wushuang's huge deity and vast divine power are all there. In the vast universe, except for the supremely powerful anti-celestial masters such as King Nine Calamity, which may pose a threat to him, master of the sword, Jian Wushuang need not care at all. Although Qingzuzi is strong, it is still a lot better than the 9 Kings of Calamity, which is itself a perfect life, and also has mastered a kingdom with a supreme combat power. Of course, Jian Wushuang and Qingfeng Shenhu are just talking now. This Qingzuzi is very powerful, but you have practiced Jian Wushuang for more than 300,000 years, and now you are only dominated by the 4th grade. However, the perception of kendo and the laws of the universe is not weaker than him. Once you grow up, get up and reach the ultimate dominance level, it should be easy to overcome this Qingzuzi. Qingfeng God who laughed. Jian Wushuang also smiled uncritically. Don't say anything, we're ready to take a shot. King Nine Kings looked ahead and said suddenly. Jian Wushuang and Qingfeng looked at each other quickly. I saw that in Fengyang Canyon, the situation had changed. After the 4 Chiba gods were chopped back by Qingzuzi, they were immediately attacked by a large number of masters around them. This time they did not have a defensive circle, and could only forcibly resist these attacks by their own means. As a result, only a wave of attacks. And they only suffered a part of the ultimate of the attack, but the horrible power applied to them, and the 4 people suffered an unprecedented hit. Fortunately, the 4 of them are all special lives, and their divine power is stronger than that of ordinary practitioners. Otherwise, the 4 of them may be killed on the spot. But now, the divine power of the 4 people has also lost most of them. Retreat, rewind. Chiba God and Zitong dominated the 4 with a hint of panic. They knew that after Qingzuzi had stopped the 4 of them, they had lost the opportunity to compete for the magic potion, let alone be hit hard again. They must leave immediately, otherwise the 4 of them are likely to lose their lives here. However, even though the 4 of them have retreated, they have obviously given up their plans to compete for the magic potion, but among the surrounding masters, many of them still pay attention to the 4 of them. Chiba God, you 4 of you have today too. 40 years ago, our team almost planted in the hands of the 4 of them, and now it is a rare opportunity to kill them. Chiba God, you 4 cannot walk out of this valley today. A large number of masters continued to slay the past towards the 4 gods of Chiba. The number of these masters is not large. There are only more than 20 people. Among them, Some of them have previously been plundered by the 4 kings of Chiba, and they have escaped their lives by chance, such as the 8-cloud demon of Demon God Kingdom. The Lord is among them. There are others who know that they have no strength to compete for the magic potion, so they simply stared at the 4 gods of Chiba. After all, the 4 Chiba gods have been severely damaged, and their power has been consumed by more than half, and their combat power is not as good as before. This is definitely a good opportunity to beat the water dog. The masters who were previously exposed by the 4 will naturally not miss this opportunity, and they have shot in order to kill the 4 here. Asshole. The gods of Chiba and Dodo are both somber and ugly. The masters of Joyang and Chi Nan were also pale and frightened. If it was during the heyday, they would naturally not care about these masters who came from the siege, but now they are all hit hard, and their combat power cannot be exerted much. In this situation, the 4 of them are likely to fall. And just at this critical moment, Chiba God was screaming hysterically, hero of the 9th calamity, sword warrior, and Qingfeng, I know you are nearby, do you just keep your eyes open? Watching me wait for the 4 to die, and seeing no death. The roar of King Jojia resounded through the entire Fengyang Canyon. King of the 9 calamities. What? King Jojia is nearby? The shadow of a person's famous tree. The ultimate masters who besieged the god of Chiba were shocked and looked around. However, they looked for a long time and did not see the king of 9 calamities. Sneer suddenly appeared on his face again. Chiba god, give up the needless struggle. This Fengyang Gorge today is the place where you are buried. Ha ha ha, dominated by Zitong, I heard that your eyes have trained a powerful pupil skill. Well, today I will dig out your eyes. God of Chiba, no one can save you today. This group of ultimate masters, with a sneer, approached step by step towards Chiba god. Mando sword, Mando sword. Chapter 41-49. The second is more. I have to say that Chiba Shrine, as the team sent by the Shrine of Life, has a status that is only the existence of King Jojia. When the 3 dominated by Zitong could not bear the chaos, Chiba Shinjun sank and screamed again, King of the 9th calamity, you and I are both members of the Shrine of Life, and you are the leader of this time. If I die here, don't you think they will blame you for the blood of the Supreme? After he finished speaking, there was a sudden twist in the void, and the Emperor Chiba's face suddenly became happy, and he quickly looked towards the void. I saw the head of Zhu Jiawang, Jian Wushuang and Qingfeng were waiting, and the 3 of them were in the shape of a character and stepped out from the void. King of the 9th calamity, you are indeed there. When the Chiba prince saw this, he immediately drew his head, the 3 pupils dominated by Zitong and Joyang, and his eyes also sent out a strong joy. However, without waiting for the 4 of them to speak again, the words of King Jojia made them half-hearted, like falling into an ice cellar. You rubbish, I really don't look down on it. If you don't care about the high level of the Temple of Life, this seat is too lazy to care about your life. The king of Jojia looks a little ugly. In fact, he and Jian Wushuang did not want to show up so early, because he knows that once he shows up, he will be the target of criticism. After all, his strength is there. Hiding in the dark first, waiting for the best chance, that's the best choice, but now just because of the 4 men of Chiba, they have to show up. No way, no matter how they look at the 4 Chiba gods, they are not pleasing to the eyes, and no matter how angry they are, the 4 Chiba gods, after all, are from the Palace of Life, just like them. They watched the death of these 4 people. Happy, but he had to consider that afterwards he would be blamed by the high level of the Temple of Life. No way, the 3 of them can only show up in advance. After looking at the 4 gods of Chiba, the king of 9 robbers, his eyes fell on the blood-red goddess blooming on the cliff in the Nanyang Gorge, and he said, the 4 of them, as long as they don't die, as for everything else, they don't care. But that magic pot, I want it. The king of 9 calamities is indeed the king of 9 calamities. I haven't seen it for 3,000 years, and I still behave so aggressively. As soon as I show up, I want to speak of the supreme divine flower. Oh, you don't agree? The king of Josai turned his gaze and looked at Yin Peng. His gaze was cold. Well, king of 9 calamities, the enmity of 3 million years ago, I will liquidate with you sooner or later, but what I want to tell you now is that this place must not be presumptuous. Yin Peng's face was cloudy and uncertain. There is so much nonsense. Zhu Jiawang heard the words, dismissed a sneer. Immediately, he lowered his head and looked at the other masters of the Fengyang Gorge, and said coldly, I want this magic potion, who are you to stop me? Or who dare to stop me? With this remark, the audience was silent. Everyone who was seen by the king of Zhoulong dodged his eyes, and bowed his head without saying a word. The king of 9 robbers was the only one who was overwhelmed by the audience. This is strength. Even if it was Zhen Wushuang, seeing this scene, he could not help but sigh. King Zhoujia's fame in the universe is too great. They are also the ultimate masters. Whether it is the general ultimate master, the top ultimate master, or even some invincible existence among the ultimate masters, there will be a trace of fear in the face of Zhu Jiawang. This kind of strength is far incomparable from the current Zhen Wushuang. Slap, slap, slap. At this moment, lazy claps came from the crowd in Fengyang Canyon. The king of 9 calamities, long heard of his name. A barefooted young man wearing a big red sun robe with hair all braided into small pigtails, with an evil smile on his face, stepped out of the void step by step. Behind him, a squad of armor, all dominated by the ultimate dominator, was right behind him, exuding a sense of killing. People of the great kingdom of God. That's the armor of the great sun god kingdom, and each one is the ultimate dominating power. The young man in the red sun robe, who wants to come, is the master who is sent by the big sun fuckingdom this time. I heard that this person has always been untamed, bloodthirsty and militant, and looked down on others. He hated countless people in Dashan, but he was extremely powerful. But he was the king of Zhunnan who was captivated by Dashan. He came to this Taro ruins. With this person, King Zhoujia wants to get the magic medicine smoothly. I'm afraid it's a bit difficult. Well, no matter who gets this strain of magic medicine, depending on the current situation, we have no hope. The ultimate masters who had originally bowed their heads and said nothing, saw their pupils shrink, and then sighed. These ultimate dominators are placed outside, and they are all the best among the ultimate dominators, but they are not enough to see in the glorious relics of this day. Heh! You want to stop me? King Zhozai looked at him. His cold face was extremely cold. A miracle drug that raises the chance of breaking the supremacy. It is not a great opportunity in this ruin, nor is it in my great Nishing country. My king is not interested in it. The young Japanese red robe shook first. Shaking his head, the next moment, the corner of his mouth yanked a bloodthirsty radian, and the front turned. However, this king has heard of your name, King Zhoujia, and it is said that you are the rare perfect life in the universe. Everyone says that you are the first person in the era of the vast universe. My king is quite interested in this. Wow! The void was twisted again, and 5 of them wore blood-colored coats, hoods, and long sickles, and walked out of the void. These 5 people couldn't see their looks clearly, and their wide hoods blocked their faces by more than half. There was a strong breath of death in them, and the sharp and curved sickle was held in their hands, as if it were not a living person, but a 9 angels coming from the area. People in the Blood Temple. Here are the 5 blood angels of the Blood Temple. The crowd once again exclaimed, for these peak powers who are famous at the dominating level, they naturally understand. We need this temple. Who blocks, who dies? The 5 blood stunned their mouths at the same time, and their voices were hoarse. The 5 blood gods in the Blood Temple made one out, and the crowd fell silent again. Who blocks, who dies? No one doubts what they say. In this vast universe, the Blood Temple is notorious. The masters and even the supremes who died in their hands are innumerable. Even some top supremes are extremely jealous of this Blood Temple. And these 5 blood envoys, although they are only the ultimate dominating strength, if they are singled out, they may not be comparable to the invincible dominators such as King of the 9 Kings, but together they are afraid that the King of 9 Kings will have to pay attention to the 3 points. Chapter 4150. The third is here. If you want this magic potion, first ask the sword in my hand. The former Taishu Shenzi Qingshu, a 4-leaf Kaifeng Shenjun, walked step by step without expression. Great Sun God Kingdom, Blood Temple, Taishu Temple. The powerful men of the three top powers, at the same time, stare at the King of Nine Calamities. In the canyon, although there are still a large number of ultimate dominators, among them there are some strong dominating squads, but these dominated people retreat to the surrounding area very tacitly when they see this scene. They were very clear that the great Sun God Kingdom, the Blood Temple, and the Taishu Temple all came forward, and the 9 kings of the most powerful were present. Their ordinary ultimate masters, it was already difficult to have the opportunity to the magic medicine already. In this battle, the protagonists are the 4 major forces that are currently facing each other. To be precise, in fact, only 2 parties are competing. The Life Shrine headed by King Jojia is one side. The 3 parties, the Great Sun God Kingdom, the Blood Temple, and the Taishu Temple, all joined forces. No way, they had to join forces in front of the King of Nine Calamities. King Jojia's eyes narrowed slightly, and there was a dignity on his face. Although he is conceited, he is not stupid. These 3 forces add up to more than 10 top-level ultimate dominators alone. Among them, Zhenan King, Qing Shuzi, and 5 blood gods join forces, all of which are invincible combat power. Together, even he has to pay attention. In the distance, there is that Yin Peng who dominates Hu Yang. I'm afraid that if there is a chance, he will give him a thunder strike. King of Nine Calamities, what shall we do now? Qing Feng asked in a low voice. King Jojia took a deep breath and replied, no matter what, this magic potion is bound to be obtained. After saying that, he flipped his right hand, and in his hand a divine grass with 9 leaves appeared. He took a deep look at Jian Wushuang, and said in a deep voice, Jiang Wushuang, I know, although you are only the 4th grade master, but your divine power is 8,000 times that of an ordinary practitioner, plus the will power given by the laws of the universe. Your divine power should also be comparable to the top ultimate master, plus your perception and understanding of the laws of the universe talented supernatural powers. Your strength will never be weaker than Chiba God and Zitong dominate them. Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded, and he acknowledged that he did have the fighting power now. You still have a body that is 68,000 miles high, and the divine power is almost endless. As long as the Supreme is not out, basically no one will kill you. Zhu Jiawang said again. Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded again. This is a 9-leaf swordgrass, which contains the very high power of Kendo. It was obtained from a mystery 10 times before the Chaos era. If it is of value, it is worse than the magic medicine in front of it. Not much, as long as you help me stop the 2 virtual sun for a moment, this 9-leaf swordgrass will belong to you, how about it? King Jojia Zhengjing said. Jian Wushuang heard that his body was shocked. Juye Zhenkao, he had heard of it. 9-leaf swordgrass was born from the birth of the heavens and earth, absorbing the growth of sword energy in the world. It is an unparalleled treasure for Kendo monk. If Jian Wushuang owns this 9-leaf swordgrass, he is confident that his own understanding of the origin of Kendo universe will inevitably reach a whole new level. By then, his strength will enter a new world. Yes. Jian Wushuang nodded. King Jojia smiled indifferently, and pushed the Juye Zhenkao directly to Jian Wushuang. Qing Feng, you help me to block the 5 blood ambassadors for a moment. I will give you 1,000,000 cosmic source stones. If this time I can pass smoothly and return to the temple, I will give you 1 more. The rule of top grade is precious, how about it? King Jojia looked at Qing Feng again and said. 5 blood emperors? Qing Feng frowned, but then laughed. These 5 blood emperors make the individual strength not very strong. The key is that the 5 men join forces, and the combat power is not under Qing Shuzi. But I don't have any other ability, but I have some ability to entangle people. If only for a moment, I can try my best. Qing Feng Prince, although the fame in the universe is not as great as Chiba and Zitong dominate them, but it does not mean that he is weak. As one of the old masters of the old Shrine of Life, he is stronger than Chiba and others, only strong and not weak, but rarely shot. And his ability to entangle the enemy is also a must. Very. When the king of Josai saw this, he was so arrogant. He did ask Jian Wushuang and Qing Feng to be able to beat Qing Shuzi and Xuemingshi. He only needed to hold on for a moment, and he was confident that he would be able to defeat the kingdom of the great god of the sun, and then he would kill Tai Shu Shenzi and Bloody Make. ultimately dominate the level, he is invincible. Photo. At the next moment, King Jujia's big hand reached out and turned directly into a towering giant hand, covering the sky and covering the sun, grabbing towards the supreme potion on the edge of the cliff. Good job. The South King of the Red Robe Youth Town of the Great Kingdom of God suddenly opened his mouth with an addictive laughter, took the lead in the sky, and blasted to the towering giant. Ha ha ha, let me see if the King of 9 Calamities with the supreme combat power is really so good. Behind him, 2 golds appeared, like a fierce sun, shooting bloodthirsty red mansions. Court death. The killer flashed in the eyes of King Jojia, and he pressed down hard in his hand. At that moment, the towering giant who had grasped the supreme divine drug turned to take a picture of Zhennan King. Arrogance. On the other side, Qing Shuzi smiled indifferently, immediately holding the sword handle in his right hand and pulling out the sheath. An incandescent swordmang roared out like a terrifying dragon, slashing at the king of Jojia. After splitting the sword, Qing Shuzi didn't stop, striding hard, and fiercely shot at King Jojia. No one can take what I want from the Blood Temple. 5 blood mourners said at the same time, their voices were hoarse and strange. The next moment, the 5 blood stunned their bodies, and instantly disappeared into place. At this moment, the invincible masters of the 3 major forces at the same time killed the king of 9 robberies. The 9 Palm King's palm photographed directly the Zhennan King who soared into the sky, and fell to the ground. And just as Qing Zuzi's sword was about to be slashed to the king of 9 robbers. An equally dazzling sword light suddenly came across the sky, directly defeating Qing Zuzi's astounding sword. Immediately afterwards, a figure in black hunting, with a cold eyebrow, stepped out and stood in front of Qing Shuzi. Your opponent is me. The black figure spoke indifferently. The 4th level master dominates. Qing Zuzi's figure fled forward, and then his eyes narrowed, and he asked, Who are you? The figure in black held the Excalibur, and heard the words calmly returned, Sword is unparalleled. Jian Wushuang? Qing Shuzi shook his head and said, I have never heard of it. Next moment, there was a violent flash in his eyes, and he drew his sword forward again. No matter who you are, whoever blocks me, anyone will die. Chapter 41-51. The first is more. Wow. Jian Guang burst out. This sword is much more powerful than that of the Jinghong Yi sword. The sword light with a width of 10 feet seems to split the world and slash it in front of Jian Wushuang. Then fight it. Jian Wushuang saw this, but was not afraid of anti-smiling, his eyes filled with surging war. Kai Tian. Jian Wushuang opened his mouth and spit out 2 words. Suddenly, a terrifying Jianhong was like Tianhe upside down, it was severely cut out, and it instantly stunning the world. Jianguang and Jianhong collided suddenly, as if the sun and the moon collided, making a loud noise. On the other side, Qingfeng Shunhu took out a Fangtian painting halberd, and the whole body shone with blue light, as if the ancient heavenly war had come to the world, and blocked the 5 blood god. Bloodmaster, if you want to get the supreme divine pill, go through my level first. Qingfeng looked a little smile, then, a towering warfare broke out. At this moment, the battle broke out. Around Fengyang Canyon, most of the masters have retreated far away, and only a few of the top ultimate masters with strong strengths have some cravings for that magic medicine, and they want to look for opportunities. And within the canyon, an unprecedented war is erupting. I saw all kinds of Jianguang, peerless, and mystery coming out one after another. The blasting Fengyang Gorge was like an earthquake. Countless mountain peaks were directly flattened, and countless lands were blown into huge pits. In the void, Jian Wushuang and Taishu Shenzi Qingzuzi blasted a sword against his face, and his face suddenly couldn't stop flushing. In this blow, I can feel that there should be no big difference between him and my perception of Kendo. My perception of the laws of the universe is stronger than him, but his divine power is far stronger than mine. Unless I play my whole cards and stop suppressing the strength of my divine power, I will have the slightest chance to really beat him with his wrist, otherwise, I will never be his opponent. Jian Wushuang knew in the heart that his current strength should be in the ultimate masters are also considered strong, but compared to these invincible masters, they are still far behind. I'm still too weak. Jian Wushuang sighed, but he was not disappointed, because at the beginning of his plan, he didn't want to defeat the Qing Shuzi, but dragged him on. Jian Wushuang lamented his weakness, but he didn't know how much his sword had caused Qing Zuzi's heart. This person's 4th-level master actually took my shot. Qing Shuzi was shocked. Despite this sword, he only used 30% of his power, but it was absolutely impossible for him to come. Master of the 4th series, what can be taken over? You know who he is. The contemporary invincibility of Taishu Temple, the absolute overlord in the ultimate domination. Even if a top ultimate master comes, even if he is not dead under one sword, at least he must be hit hard. But the person in front of him, but the master of the 4th series, is a small character who has no fame in the universe. On weekdays, this kind of person is like a ant-like character. If anyone told him that a 4th-ranking master could take him a sword, he would only treat it as a joke, but now, he saw with his own eyes such a 4th-rank master, not only took him a sword, and unscathed. How can that be? Jian Wushuang, right? Good, I remember your name, but that's all for now. Qing Shuzi looked cold, holding the handle of his sword in his right hand, and stepped forward. Bang! Qing Shuzi turned into a streamer in an instant, like the Shundian that tore the night, roaring and chopping chaos who soared. Starfall. Heaven and earth are suddenly darkened. Jian Wushuang looked up at this invincible sword, his face was full of dignity, he did not dare to magnify it, and the power of 8,000 times erupted instantly. This is more than that. Jian Wushuang once again urged the willpower given by the laws of the universe, and his divine power soared again. The earth guards the sword formation. Buzzing. A large number of swordsmania swept wildly, and in the blink of an eye formed a huge array of guardian swords covering the whole body of the sword, and the stream of tearing night has arrived, just like a dragon, fiercely bit on the sword array of the sword unparalleled. The next moment, the sword unparalleled flew out, smashed to the ground severely, and directly hit a bottomless pit. Countless fumes filled the air. Ended. In the position where Jian Wushuang stood before, Qing Shuzi stood up in the air, his face expressionless. He could feel that his sword directly broke the sword array of Jian Wushuang, and split it on the body of Jian Wushuang. A 4th-level master, who bears the sword in front of him, must be dead. Shaking his head, Qing Shuzi raised his head and looked at the other side of the sky. There the battlefield between King Zhoujia and Zhennan King. After all the loud noise came, the aftermath of the battle between King Zhouzai and Zhennan King directly set off a storm of chaos. Where the storm passed, countless voids trembled, enough to destroy the ordinary ultimate master. In the middle of the storm, King Zhoulong and Zhennan King were like heaven and earth, and each time they fought, they fell apart. Zhennan King, you dare to stop me because of this strength? It's ridiculous. Zhu Jiewang took the shot of Zhennan King with his palm, stared, and sneered sneer. His 9 skills were continuously used by him, like a storm, and he was photographed severely to the king of Zhennan. Now, he has not suppressed his own realm, and is more than 1,000 times stronger than the Zhoulong Wang that Jian Wushuang met at the trial ground. King Zhennan said nothing, and his face was somber that he could drip water. He didn't expect that the king of Zhouzai was so terrified. Facing the king of 9 calamities, he even had a feeling of facing the supreme. The king of Zhennan will die. Qing Shuzi looked at this scene and shook his head. He could see that the king of the south of the town had already dealt out the cards, but he was still crushed by the king of Zhoujia. In terms of strength, King Zhoujia is definitely more powerful than King Zhennan. The king of 9 calamities has the supreme combat power in the universe. Now it seems that it is true. Qing Zuzi's eyes narrowed, but in his heart he quickly made a decision. He must gather him, 5 envoys, and King Zhennan. It is possible for people to compete, even to suppress the king of Zhoujia, otherwise, once king of Zhoujien resolves the king of Zhennan, the next one to be resolved is probably him. As soon as he stepped into a sword mangling, he was ready to fire towards King Zhoujia. However, just then, I said, your opponent is me. A cold voice sounded behind his ears. The next moment, a sharp pole reached the sky, like a sharp moonlight, chopped at him severely and cut off his way. Chapter 4152. Second more. Okay. Qing Zu's steps stopped abruptly, and he looked down suddenly, his face suddenly sinking. There, in a huge pit, the fumes of the sky gradually dispersed. Jian Wushuang stood proudly, with black hair flying all over his head, holding the Wu weapon sword in his right hand, his sword pointed at the ground obliquely, his expression calmed down. There was a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. Qing Shuzi, with me here, you can't enter halfway. Jian Wushuang made a light stroke with his right hand, and the ground was instantly cut through a bottomless trench, blocking him and Qing Shuzi. Stroke with a sword to teach you not to walk halfway. You're looking for death. Qing Shuzi suddenly became furious, his intentions burst out in his eyes, and he fought fiercely towards the sword Wushuang. Sword art, scary dragon, bang. At this moment, Qing Shuzi disappeared with the magic sword in his hand. The next moment, a thundering thunder dragon poked his head out of the void, it opened its huge mouth, roared, and the sky shook. Sword unparalleled, this sword is one of the strongest exterminations I have created in my long years of practice, enough to kill any master below the supreme realm. You should be proud when you die in this sword. Shuzi doesn't have any emotional sound. The sword was unparalleled, and suddenly his eyes rose sharply, taking a deep breath. Talented, supernatural, buzzing. The surrounding void was slightly shaken. Followed by a large amount of black air, it suddenly swept up, covering the void in the blink of an eye. The heavens and the earth were completely dim, there was no light at all, and the whole heaven and earth fell into absolute darkness. Mystery, dragon extinction. Jian's eyes flashed sharply, and the vast and imposing divine power in his body, at this moment, began to burn frantically at a horrible speed. The divine power burned wildly, and the power that he could burst out instantly reached a whole new level. The gifted supernatural primitive universe and the dragon extinction technique are one of the two major hole cards of Jian Wushuang. At this moment, they are being cast at the same time. Under these two hole cards, Jian Wushuang's strength also suddenly skyrocketed. He stared at the thunder dragon that had overwhelmed the heavens and earth, his expression suddenly calmed down and said, Qing Shuzi, I also have a sword, Yuan look. Grunt. At this moment, the turbulent wind, the flowing clouds, the rising dust, and the countless flying dust in the Fengyang Canyon trembled. At this moment, everything in the world seemed to be attracted, and all rushed towards the sword without hands. The clouds in the sky, the howling wind, and the floating dust all turned into the purest source of energy in the world, like the return of the sea and the 10,000 swords, all converging towards the sword without hands. Vast and cover the sun. A large number of masters around, and even a few people who were fighting fiercely at this moment couldn't help but stop the movements in their hands, looked up to this scene, and there was a fascination in the eyes. In the end, this pure source of energy all converged in the swordless hands, and turned into a silver sword rainbow of 100 feet. This sword was realized by Jian Wushuang in the life of Kendo, and gathered all the power of Jian Wushuang. This sword once appeared in the proving ground. One sword broke Jujiawang and Jiudao, and shocked the entire Palace of Life. This sword is nameless, but it is the strongest sword of Sword Wushuang today. For more than 4,000 years, after he realized the sword in the trial hall of the Palace of Life, Jian Wushuang did not stop studying for a moment. After realizing 3,000 years in Hanoi, 1,000 years in the cosmic boat, and more than 4,000 years, Jian Wushuang's perception of this sword finally reached its limit. Although this sword is still not perfect, its edge is revealed. Cut. The sword holds Baizhong sword rainbow without hands and splits, with black hair flying like a peerless sword god. Suddenly, this huge sword rainbow of the size of 100 feet suddenly cut off towards the thunder dragon in the primitive universe. The ground was ripped open to 3,000 feet. In the realm of the primitive universe formation, you can suppress each other and strengthen yourself. After this sword rainbow entered the realm of the primitive universe, mighty power surged again. Destroy the heavens and the earth as disasters. Rumble. This Baizhong Jianhong finally collided with the thunder dragon of Qing Shuzi. At this moment, there was a twist in the void, and a huge shock wave spread rapidly at the point where the two collided, squeezing the ground down 10 miles. Under this sword, time seems to be still, and space seems to be broken. The thunder dragon in the world of shouting just persisted for less than a short time, then suddenly shattered. Wearing a white robe and a big robe behind, the Qingshu child embroidered with the huge word too empty suddenly retreated. Qingshu chopped 3 swords before chopping this sword rainbow. How is it possible? He looked down and saw a tiny bloodline in his right hand, furious to the extreme. This sword actually broke his thunder dragon directly and cut him. Although it is only a subtle bloodline, he has plunged him into anger. I don't know how many years, since he reached the ultimate level, no one has hurt him for half a point. But at this moment, he was actually wounded with a sword by a 4th-level master. Shame. For him, for his pride as the son of God, it was a shame. Jian Wushuang, I will kill you today. The next moment, Qingshu raised his head and looked at Jian Wushuang. The cold-hearted intention in his eyes was enough to freeze Joyo. This child will not be removed today, and it will become a serious problem in the future. And sword unparalleled, although this sword forced the Qingshu back, but his body also suffered a little tremor, and although this sword has been formed, but after all, it is not really perfect, he is not perfect control, a sword cast down, he himself was affected by some swordsmanship. I hope you can do it. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly, and looked at the Zhu Jiawang at the side and laughed. As long as he insists on a moment of effort, but it has been a while, and during this time, the South King of the town has been completely destroyed by the King of 9 calamities, even his 7 gods Wei, there are only 2 or 3 miserable. Jian Wushuang, support 10 more breaths, as long as 10 breaths time, I can get the supreme magic medicine. King Zhoujia glanced at Jian Wushuang, his voice sank. No problem. Jian Wushuang nodded. At this time, Qingshu had already killed 10 breaths. Jian Wushuang, you're too arrogant. Qingshu looked coldly, holding the sword to the sword Wushuang fiercely. At this moment, he no longer regards Jian Wushuang as a 4th-level dominated ant on the spot, but as an invincible dominated by his peers. His strength is no longer reserved. Chapter 41-53. The first is more. Wow. Qingshu's stabbed Excalibur was like a poisonous snake suddenly bursting out, incredibly fast. Jian Wushuang's pupils shrank, holding up the Wu Weeping sword in his hand, blocking the sword across. The 2 swords collided together, and suddenly a violent storm raged around. The void under the sword's feet exploded in vain. Roll. The sword screamed without a hit, and the Excalibur in his hand opened the screen like a peacock, passing a beautiful arc in the void. Voila! With the willful execution of the sword, under the blessing of the primitive universe and the mystery of dragon extermination, the power of this sword also soared to the extreme. Qingshu is also the strongest fighting force broke out. However, on the understanding of Kendo, Jian Wushuang is not inferior to Qingshu. On the understanding of the laws of the universe, Jian Wushuang is even higher than Qingshu. The only thing that Qingshu is stronger than Jian Wushuang is that he is the invincible being in the ultimate master, and exerts the most powerful divine power after the secret operation. But this divine power was wiped out immediately after the sword unparalleled casts the dragon extermination technique and the primitive universe. The current sword Wushuang is not inferior to this Qingshu in terms of divine power. Natural sword Wushuang can completely fight with Qingshu. Shocking roar and collision sounded in the void of Fengyang Canyon one after another. Many of the ultimate masters who watched the battle around saw the scene in front of them, and their heads were a little cyanotic. A 4th rank dominated, is it comparable to Qingshu's fight? Who is this 4th-ranked dominator? Where did this guy come from, and how could it be so scary? Everyone was incredible about the scene at hand. A 4th-level master, the ultimate master in the presence, it is almost no different from the ants. On weekdays, they can easily slaughter a large number of 4th-level masters with a wave of their hands, but today, such a 4th-level master dominates the Qingshu who has invincible combat power among the ultimate masters. They can see that Qingshu has come up with all the strength, but despite this, they still have no other way to take the opponent, and they can't even gain the slightest advantage in the battle with the opponent. This kind of combat power has completely exceeded their imagination. Impossible. This is impossible. Qing Shuzi was also furious. It is comparable to a fourth-ranked dominating fan, which is definitely his greatest shame in his life. However, he did not know that Qing Shuzi had already done his best in this fight, but Jian Wushuang actually did not use his whole cards. For example, his talented magical power and life deterrence had never been used. However, his task was only responsible for entanglement of this young man. There was no need to desperately. Moreover, the time for 10 breaths is almost the same. Suddenly, come on! A loud scream rang through the void. Huh! Jian Wushuang immediately looked intently, and saw that King Zhoujia had already put the supreme divine medicine in his bag, and he had rescued the nearly collapsed Qingfeng priest from the 5 blood sacrifice, and swept towards Jian Wushuang extremely fast. Jian Wushuang breathed a sigh of relief. Now that the king of Zhouzai has now got the supreme potion, it is naturally unnecessary for him to fight with Qing Shuzi again. Next moment, the king of 9 robbers rushed forward, raised the sword unparalleled, and stormed away in the distance. At his speed, even with Qingfeng Huhu and Jian Wushuang at the same time, none of the ultimate masters present were chasing him. The 3 of them could completely retreat. But also at this moment, King of Calamity, Suffer, a strange figure, without any sign, appeared in the surrounding void, and this man was the master of Yinpeng. The Lord Yinpeng had resentment against the King of 9 Calamities. He had been waiting in the surrounding void before, just waiting for the perfect opportunity to perform a fatal blow to the King of 9 Calamities. But now, he had finally waited for this wonderful opportunity. I saw a handful of Jin Ji in his hand. A drop of purple and black venom dripped at the sharp edge of the Jin Ji, and the gas burning in the void burst into poisonous smoke. Go with. There was a fierce flash in Yin Peng's eyes, and he aimed at the queen of Zhu Jiawang and threw it. Suddenly, this Jin Ji actually jumped in the void. A shuttle has reached the back of the king of the 9 robbers, and slammed in. Clang! Jin Ji hit the armor on the surface of King Zhoulang and made a sound of metal impact. However, the sharp edge of Jinj did penetrate the armor of King Zhoulang's body instantly and entered the body of King Zhoulang. I saw King Zhujia's body shake, but instead of turning back, the divine power broke out and swept forward at a faster speed. In the blink of an eye, the king of 9 kings, Sword Wushuang, and Qingfeng were waiting for 3,000 miles, and disappeared into Fengyang Canyon. Inside Fengyang Canyon, the red robe of Zhennan King of the Great Divine Kingdom was shattered, his beard radiated, and the wolf was trembling to the extreme. He originally followed his 7 armors, 5 died, and the remaining 2 were just hanging barely. Qing Shuzi's face was iron blue, and a face was somber that dripping water could come. The 3 major forces, the only one who has blood in the Temple of Heaven, looked quite at ease. Among the 5 ambassadors, one with a thin build, looked at Zhennan King and Qing Shuzi, and said coldly, a man bragging about how powerful he is every day, he took the initiative to challenge the king of Zhouzai. There is no backhand, and the other is that even a 4th-level master can't be resolved. It is really a waste. You. Qing Shuzi and Zhennan King changed their colors. Why? Still want to fight? 5 smirks made a mockery revealed contempt. The king of Zhennan took a deep breath. If he was in the heyday, he would not be afraid of facing the 5 blood sacrifice, but now he is seriously injured, and he can't get a shot right now. What about you? With 5 people working together, even a Qingfeng prince can't kill him, but where is he strong? Zhennan Wang, she laughed and said with a lip to his lips. What are you talking about? 5 blood mines made when Yang's eyes narrow at the same time, shooting cold and cold. All 3, now is not the time for quarrels. Do you plan to watch the supreme divine pill taken away? At this moment, a black-eyed hawk-nosed man Yinpeng came over. Hey! They have run away. Do you still have a way? Zhennan King, Qing Shuzi, Shuemingshi, and looked at the hawk-nosed man at the same time. Yinpeng dominated with a smile and said, the 9 kings of the 9 kings hit me a go and cant go far. My go has not only the poison that is enough to kill the ultimate dominator of the peak, but also in that poison, it leaves a trace of my origin. The Sword King. Chapter 4154. Second More. Imprint of origin? King Zhennan, Qing Shuzi, and others looked all the same. The King of Nine Dragons was eager to flee, and he could completely clear out those poisons in the first place. I can find his existence based on this original imprint, but if you continue to grind, wait for King Nine, all the poison was removed, and my original mark was completely erased, then I could not find him again. Yin Peng dominated. After listening to Yin Peng's dominion, King Zhennan, Qing Shuzi, and the 5 blood gods all brightened his eyes immediately. Very well, let's kill it now. This time, the power of our 4 is assembled, and I don't believe King Jotsai will not die. King Zhennan pulled a sneer and hate. The 5 blood stunners looked at each other, nodded, and spit out a sentence. The supreme divine potion belongs to me, and the 9 calamities to you. Qing Shuzi said with a complexion, I can disregard the supreme potion and the king of 9 calamities, but the sword is unparalleled, and I want him to die. Qing Zuzi's original goal was that of the magic drug, but just after the battle with Jian Wushuang, he became a shame in his life. He could not tolerate this shame to continue to live in this world, so compared to that magic medicine, he now wants to slay the sword unparalleled. And Yin Peng dominated the sight, and there was a hint of yin and pleasure in his eyes. These major forces reached an agreement in an instant. Even under the leadership of Yin Peng, they left directly and went to the place where Zhu Jiawang, Jian Wushuang, and Qing Feng disappeared. As for the many masters around Fengyang Canyon, seeing that the protagonists in this battle have already left, they have also left. Of course, they all know that the battle for the magic drug is not over yet. After all, the king of Zhennan has caught up with them. As for the final result, I do not know. However, the war that erupted in Fengyang Gorge alone was enough to make them talk. First of all, it is naturally the strength of the king of 9 calamities. The king of 9 dragons can have such a great reputation in the universe and is considered by many to be the first person to dominate it. After this battle, it has been fully confirmed. The king of the south of the town is also an invincible power in the ultimate domination. In addition, there are several armors around him. They are also the top ultimate dominators. As a result, they were defeated by the 9 kings alone. This kind of strength has completely gone beyond the scope of domination. It is rumored that the king of 9 calamities has the supreme combat power, and it really is true. In addition, there was the battle between Qing Shuzi and Jian Wushuang, which shocked everyone. No one had thought that the innocent Qing Zuzi who could be called invincible was actually comparable to a 4th-ranked dominator. Although so far, they do not know the name of the 4th-ranking dominator, but the 4th-ranking dominator has been deeply remembered by everyone present. On a mountain, the 3 men of swordsmanship stopped temporarily. Among the 3, Jian Wushuang is the easiest. He fought with Qing Shuzi. Although he has performed a lot of magical powers by using dragon demystification, don't forget that he now has a body with a height of 68,000 miles. It's unbelievable that burning of this divine power is nothing to him at all. It can be said that there was no loss in the battle with Qing Shuzi. The Qingfeng prince was a bit miserable. At the same time, he faced the attack of the 5 blood ambassadors at the same time, struggling to do his best, but he only supported hard. At the end, he lost a lot of divine power. The remaining divine power now less than 30%. As for the king of 9 calamities, he was mainly attacked by Yin Peng. Yin Peng. The king of Jotsai clenched his teeth, his fists clenched, his face was extremely gloomy. He actually had a place to dominate Yin Peng before, but Yin Peng's dominance was very clever, and he was quietly approaching him. At that time, he had just got the magic medicine and was anxious to leave. He didn't notice for a while before he got Yin Peng. And Yin Peng's move did not hurt him badly. What a terrible poison. King Zhojia has been soaked with sweat and has been fleeing before. He just relies on his own divine power to forbid the venom from eroding. But now he really stopped. When he wanted to know the poisonous things, he realized that the terrible degree of those poisonous things was far beyond his imagination. This is definitely not the venom that dominates the level. It is not an accident. This should be made by the poison master of the supreme level. The king of Zhojia said lowly. Extreme level of venom? Jian Wushuang was also surprised. He used to rely on that particular venom to kill his enemies, and he knew that the venom was terrible. Under normal circumstances, if a master reaches the peak with poison, then the venom he refined can completely threaten the top and even invincible ultimate masters. And if the venom created by the venom master at the highest level can also threaten the supreme master at the same level. The 9 kings are now suffering from this level of venom. It's terrible. I've lost almost 40% of my divine power, but those venoms have not been completely cleaned up yet. The king of 9 calamities marveled. Jian Wushuang also took a breath of air. King Zhoujia, that's the perfect life. Although his body is not as shocking as his own 68,000 miles, the divine power he possesses is definitely 1,000 times or even 10,000 times more than the ultimate master. Under the circumstances, in order to resist the erosion of that venom, nearly 40% of the divine power was suddenly lost. And that venom has not been completely removed. It can be seen how good the venom is. King of Zhoujia, is it okay? Jian Wushuang looked at King of Zhoujia. Fortunately, it is me. The divine power itself is comparable to the supreme. It can directly compete with this venom, and my divine power is thousands of times and even thousands of times more than ordinary practitioners, otherwise. The King of Kings shook his head gently. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang relieved. Obviously, the King of 9 dragons was able to completely remove that poison. It's a real loss of life this time. Qing Fengshen smiled bitterly at the moment. His body was on the verge of collapse, but the blood on his face was slightly more. He wanted to recover completely, at least for nearly 1,000 years. Jian Wushuang smiled lightly. Both Zhu Jiawang and Qing Fengshen who were miserable, but it was only a small loss. And just that battle, he not only played against the ultimate masters such as Qing Shuzi, verified how far his strength has reached, but also obtained a 9-leaf sword grass, and the harvest was very great. Chapter 4155. The first is more. This battle in Fengyang Gorge is quite risky, but fortunately we all got what we wanted. A sudden smile appeared on the face of King Zhoujia. The magic potion is already in his hands. With this strain, he has some more opportunities to break through and become supreme. Well, let's go find a place to hide now, after I have completely cleared the venom out of my body, and restored my divine body and divine power to the peak, then I will continue to fight. King Zhoujia rode. Jian Wushuang and Qing Feng looked nodded. When the 3 were about to find a hidden place, suddenly a cold laughter blew in the sky. Ha ha ha, King Zhoujia, where do you want to escape? King Zhoujia and Jian Wushuang heard the words, and all of a sudden his face changed, and quickly looked up. I saw King Zhennan, Qing Zuzi, Yinpeng dominated above them, plus 5 blood emissaries, 8 ultimate masters of invincible level, looking down at them with their hands and feet in the void. Why did they come so quickly? Qing Fengshen, whose face suddenly became extremely ugly. As a matter of course, the ruins of Tailuo are so vast that it is impossible for these people to find them so quickly. Jian Wushuang and Zhu Jiawang looked at this scene, and their frowns could not help but frown. That's strange. After they left the Fengyang Canyon, they changed their directions dozens of times in succession, and deliberately avoided all the powerful people around them, and only came here. According to the truth, the king of Zhennan and other people could not find them even if they were supernatural. The location is right. But now, is it the venom inside me? The king of Zhoujia sank, and immediately looked into his own body. Sure enough, there was a very vague mark in the part of the venom still in his body. This mark is completely fused with those venoms. Before the King of 9 Calamities, he was wholeheartedly resisting the erosion of these venoms, and he did not notice the existence of this mark. Yinpeng. The King of Zhoujia raised his head, staring at Dominion Yinpeng with a flash of murder in his eyes. At this moment, his dominance against Dominion Yinpeng reached the point where it could not be added. How? King Zhoujia, are you very angry now? Well, keep your anger. Next, I will keep you suffering in despair, and the pain you inflicted on me 3 million years ago. Ha 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 ha. Yinpeng dominated the King of Zhoujia, and the corners of his mouth slowly opened, covering his face with a low laugh, and his waist was all bent, his eyes were full of crazy pleasure. 3 million years ago, his clan was all slaughtered by the King of Nine Robbers, and only he was left to perform a secret technique, escaped from the hands of King Nine Robbers, and recovered his life. The hatred of the twos is not shared. 3 million years. He waited for this opportunity for 3 million years. You wanna die. How arrogant is the King of Nine Calamities, and how can he endure the humiliation that Yin Peng dominates? He immediately wants to get violent, kill Yin Peng regardless of everything, and then quickly. Just as he was about to rise into the sky, a hand suddenly rested on his shoulder, and he pressed it lightly. Don't hit him, he is deliberately seducing you to kill him. Jian Wushuang shook his head and said lightly. King Zhoujia was stunned by his anger, but sword was unparalleled. Above them, Zhennan King and others have become prismatic, like a large net, completely sealing off the three of them. Once the King of Nine Robbers rushed up and slaughtered with them, they would immediately fall into their nets. Although Zhoujia Wang is strong, there is still a strong poison in the body, which is not completely ruled out, and the divine power is greatly damaged. It is also very reluctant to fight against the 8 invincible masters. This battle cannot be fought, only flee. Jian Wushuang said in a voice. Zhu Wang took a deep breath. He was not stupid. After this impulse, he naturally calmed down quickly. The sword is unparalleled. If we continue to be together, I will not be afraid, but you two are likely to be a drag on me, so I will directly cast a thought on the kingdom of God and trap these 8 people. You and Qingfeng are waiting. Take the opportunity to leave. King Zhoujia stared at Zhennan King, Xueming Shi, and others over the sky, and returned the message. Jian Wushuang nodded for a moment, then nodded. He has never been an arrogant person. Naturally, he can see that in this situation, although his state is still at its peak, he can no longer perform the trick of the primitive universe. If he fights with Qing Shuzi again, he will definitely not be Qing Shuzi. Their opponents, of course, relying on their own life-saving ability, and the incredible divine body and divine power, these people cannot kill him in front of them. However, Qingfeng Shenhu's condition is so bad that he can't help at all, and may even become a drag for the King of Nine Calamities. Not as good as the two left directly. Then you take care of everything. Jian Wushuang Dao. After hearing the words, King Zhoujia smiled boldly at Jian Wushuang, and said sternly, rest assured that with these 8 people joining forces, I may not be an opponent, but in the world, if King Zhoujia wants to leave, there is no one except Supreme can stay. This was his arrogance, and also the confidence of the first person to dominate the realm at that time. Jian Wushuang looked at Zhu Jiwang's smile on him, suddenly a little dumb. From the battle in Fengyang Gorge to the present, although he and King Zhouzai did not make it clear, the two were already suffering. After all, before they entered the ruins of Tai Luo, they were both confrontational. The sword is unparalleled, Qingfeng looks great, go. The next moment, I saw King Nine Calm's eyes condense, and a loud drink sounded loudly between heaven and earth. I miss the kingdom of God. Rumble. Suddenly, an unprecedented powerful breath centered on the King of the Nine Calamities, bursting away. This breath is completely different from the breath of the previous King of the Nine Kings. It is full of a sense of avenue and mystery. When this breath comes out, the entire Taro ruins seem to be unbearable, and it emits a kakaka sound similar to glass breaking. The dark black iron chains shot out from the void, covering the sky and forming a cold boundary, enclosing 8 people in that town. In that realm, the sky and the earth changed dramatically, mountains and rivers stood tall, mountains and rivers rushed, like a world of its own. This is a thought of the kingdom of God. How is it possible? The King of Nine Calamities has not yet broken through the Supreme. How can it be possible to realize the thought of the kingdom of God? Even the Supreme, it is only possible to master the kingdom of God once it reaches a certain level. The King of Nine Calamities has exerted his power to dominate the kingdom of God. King Zhennan, Qingzuzi, Wuming Wuxia, Yinpeng dominated. At this moment, they all looked at each other in shock. Chapter 41:56. Second more. At the thought of the kingdom of God, this trick is difficult to master even many supreme masters, and for the master, it is almost a luxury to realize this trick. But today, the Nine Calamities King, who is the first master in the universe, not only possesses supreme combat power, he even has mastered the kingdom of God. How far is he from the true supreme? In the eyes of the 8 who were as appalling as ghosts, the King of 9 Kings laughed wildly, and his body was soaring into the sky. Jian Wushuang, live well, I will fight with you after you break through the ultimate master. I will not lose you again at that time. In mid-air, King Zhoujia took a deep look at Jian Wushuang, then turned his eyes. Without any hesitation, he rushed towards the 8 people in Zhennan King without any hesitation. He froze with coldness and began to boil. Sure. The sword had no double focus, and then did not dare to delay, grabbing Qingfeng and looting away. Immediately, Jian Wushuang left the mountain and blasted towards a place in the ruins that no one had yet explored. At the same time, a battle broke out in the 9 gods of Zhujiawang. The battle has turned upside down and the sun and the moon have faded. After a joss stick, the kingdom of God collapsed every inch, and the king of 9 calamities disappeared. King of the 9 calamities has been injured by the 8 of us, we can't escape far, chase. Xueming Wu made his face gloomy to the extreme. At this moment, their black robes were broken, and even the black moon sickle in their hands was broken by 3. Next moment, they swept away in one direction. The king of Zhennan, who had been seriously injured, became more serious. After taking an invaluable elixir, he looked at Yin Peng's master, and stepped on the same foot, and quickly followed. Of the 8, only Qingzuzi remained in place. His face was cold, his gaze was looking in the direction that Jian Wushuang had swept away before, his voice was cold. Sword Wushuang, I am not interested in the 9 kings of the calamity, but you, I said, Shongpo by Fel Huanghuang, I will kill you. You cannot escape. Too much forbidden surgery, God, puff. Qingzuzi bit his tongue and opened his mouth to spit out blood. Suddenly, the essence of blood was twisted and condensed in the air, but it turned into 3 small words, sword warriors. Gather. Qingzuzi whispered in a low voice. Suddenly, the 3 scarlet characters sword warriors suddenly collapsed and turned into a scarlet sword. The point of the sword pointed to the southwest and kept trembling. Qingzuzi's complexion was blue and white for a while, and he could see that this secret technique was equally costly to him. Southwest. Jian Wushuang, this time I see you die. Seeing this, Qingzuzi evoked a cold smile on the corner of his mouth, stepped hard, followed the sword, and quickly swept forward. Southwest, at a high altitude. Jian Wushuang, carrying Qingfeng's spirits, was rushing, and suddenly, at the top of his head, countless blood condensed, forming a light arrow in the shape of a small sword. What is this? Jian Wushuang's expression changed. Looking at this blood-colored arrow, a kind of bad premonition appeared in his heart. Jian Wushuang fled. This is the forbidden technique of Taishu Temple. Qingfeng was very knowledgeable. He thought about it for a moment, and then recognized the arrow, and his face changed suddenly. God forbids surgery? Jian Wushuang heard the words, and there was a doubt in his eyes. Qingfeng Shunhu looked ugly, and replied, this forbidden technique is one of the 5 major forbidden techniques of the Taishu Temple. Everyone who has been forbidden, whether it is from heaven or earth, even escapes to the edge of the universe, while the person who cast the forbidden spell is found until it is beheaded or the person who casts the forbidden spell dies, otherwise the blood-colored arrow will always exist, and the color of the blood-colored arrow will continue to become richer as the distance between the 2 approaches. In other words, no matter where you flee, Qingzuzi will find you until you die. Jian Wushuang heard the words, his face could not help but sink. He knew that the Qingzuzi might chase him regardless of the king of the 9 robbers, but he did not expect that the Qingzuzi would kill him so strongly. Even at all costs, this kind of prohibition was clearly represented. What kind of hatred is this? What's wrong? Speaking of which, I'm just in the process of the magic drug fight, to stop him. Is this Qingzuzi so endless? Jian Wushuang frowned. However, he did not know that Qingzuzi, as the first genius of the era of the Taishu Temple, had more arrogance in his heart than 9 kings. He boasted that he was talented and looked at the whole universe. Except for King 9 Calamity, no one looked at him. And in fact, he didn't look down on the King of Calamity very much, because in his opinion, The King of Calamity is only because of the perfect level of life, but he is more confident than others how much weaker than the King of 9 Calamities. But such a arrogant peerless genius, but in the Battle of Fengyang Gorge, countless people among them were stopped by a 4th-level master to the front. Moreover, he exerted himself to the best of his ability, and he had no way to dominate the 4th grade. This is absolutely a shame for his life. And this shame can only be washed away with the sword's life. Because of this, he no longer even contends for the magic potion in the hands of King Jiujia, but directly kills Xiong Jian Wushuang. As long as Jian Wushuang is not dead, he will definitely become the demon of Qing Shuzi forever. The Qing Shuzi is too narrow-minded. Jian Wushuang couldn't help it. Jian Wushuang, run away first. According to my guess, Zhennan King and others should go and kill King Jiuzai. The only one who will chase you is Qing Shuzi. If only Qing Shuzi is alone, wait for me. Restore some, you and I should be able to contend with him, Qingfeng Shenhu said. Well, this can only be the case now. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly. Suddenly, Jian's footsteps slammed like a cannonball, and instantly disappeared in place. Not long after, the place where Jian Wushuang stayed before, a white robe with a sword figure came in. Well, there is still a lot of breath of divine power in the air, it should not have been far. Qing Shuzi said blankly and said to himself. Jian Wushuang, this time I see where you fled. The next moment, Qing Shuzi flickered, and chased again in one direction. In a dense forest, the sword Wushuang rushed forward, each step was thousands of miles away. It's getting closer. Jian Wushuang's face was gloomy to the extreme, and the blood-colored arrow at the top of his head became thicker and thicker. This shows that the distance between Qing Shuzi and him is constantly drawing in. He glanced down at Qingfeng, and shook his head. Chapter 41-57. The first is more. In order to counteract the 5 blood mourners of the Blood Temple, Qingfeng not only lost weight and lost most of his divine power, but even he also performed some unique mysteries. These mysteries are not cheap, leading to Qingfeng in a short period of time, Shenhu is difficult to restore strength. Even now, Qingfeng Shenhu has only slightly restored the body, but he still has a long way to go to restore his peak strength. Jiang Wushuang, otherwise you can drop me, you are also a burden with me. Qingfeng Godhu looked up at Qingfeng Godhu, said with a bitter smile. It's not that far. Jian Wushuang shook his head and continued to rush forward. However, it wasn't time for Ayaka. Swords warriors. A cold drink exploded in the air. Jian Wushuang looked back abruptly, and saw that in the distant sky, Qing Shuzi sneered, and was approaching him quickly. In front of Qing Shuzi, a blood-colored sword was floating in the air, and the sharp point of the sword pointed to his sword unparalleled. Jian Wushuang, give up the unnecessary struggle, obediently grabbed it, maybe I can spare you a life. Qing Shuzi sneered. Noisy. Jian Wushuang face gloomy, and continued to plunder. Useless, you cannot escape in the face of absolute pressure. Qing Shuzi shook his head in disdain, turned out to be another acceleration, approaching the sword unparalleled. Jian Wushuang's speed is not uncomfortable. With a lot of divine power as the support, the general ultimate master is not as good as him. However, compared to Qing Shuzi, who is invincible in the ultimate realm, Jian Wushuang's speed is far worse. Rumble. The two cascaded into a streamer in the air, dragged a long tail flame, crossed the sky, gradually separated from the central area of the Tara ruins, and swept toward the remote area where no one was interested. Jian Wushuang, put me down, or we'll all die. Qingfeng Shenhu seriously looked at Jian Wushuang, and said positively. Jian Wushuang didn't answer, but stepped hard and drank. Mystery, dragon destroys. Bang! The vast divine power in Jian Wushuang's body suddenly boiled, and the speed erupted again instantly, raising several grades. In a short time, Qing Shuzi and Jian Wushuang were gradually getting closer. After Jian Wushuang used dragon demystification, they pulled away again. Oh! Can it be faster? Qing Shuzi raised an eyebrow, and couldn't help but startled. The speed of Jian Wushuang had already shocked him enough. Unexpectedly, Jian Wushuang could be even faster on this basis. At the same time that Qing Shuzi was amazed, the murderous power against sword unparalleled was more and more intense. Don't stay here. Shaking his head, Qing Zuzi's mouth sneered again. What mystical speed should be the price of this sword? I don't believe it, he can use it forever. After Qing Shuzi said, he was not in a hurry to catch up with Jian Wushuang, but hung far behind. Anyway, there is a God-inhibiting technique. He is not afraid that Jian Wushuang can escape. God banned surgery, rest until the dead. As long as the sword is undead, you can't escape. Ahead. Jian Wushuang's face was gloomy. Qing Shuzi was right. Dragon mystery did make his power burst instantly, but there was a time limit. Once his power was exhausted, he would still be overtaken by Qing Shuzi. God, how are you recovering? Jian Wushuang asked, looking down. What he can do now is to delay the time as much as possible and let the Fengfeng God who recover quickly. At that time, they will be able to gather the strength of the two to counter the Qingzuzi. At this time and a half. I guess it's impossible to recover. Qingfeng Shunhu smiled wryly and shook his head. Jian Shuangshuang saw this, and the light in his eyes kept blinking. Call out. Jian Wushuang and Qing Shuzi turned into two streamers, one after the other, and they kept passing across the sky quickly. As the sword unparalleled dragon blasts out the mystery of the dragon, at the cost of burning God's power, let his speed soar, and soon, the distance between the two continues to increase. Not long after, Qing Shuzi was left behind, his figure disappeared. However, Jian Wushuang's face was not half happy. There was no trace of the disappearance of the little sword arrow hanging above his head. This means that no matter if he fled to the ends of the earth, as long as the arrow was there, Qingzuzi could find him. No, I can't go on like this. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang's eyes flashed a decisive look. Seeing Qingfeng Shunhu like this, it will be difficult to recover in a short time, and although his divine power is immense, it is impossible to continue burning like this unbridled, and once the dragon mystery burning is stopped, Qing Shuzi can immediately catch up. Rather than let Qingfeng's prince leave first, anyway, Qing Shuzi's goal is him. Qingfeng prince is dead or alive, Qing Shuzi simply doesn't care. When thinking about this, Jian Wushuang said, Qingfeng Shunhu, you and I will leave separately. After hearing a word, Qingfeng Shunhu shook his head and said, the target of Qing Shuzi is you. If you and I are together, although I have not recovered to the peak strength, if at all costs, it will be enough to make him jealous, but as soon as I leave, there is really no scruples on this young boy. Qingfeng Shunhu can actually leave directly. The Qing Shuzi did not take him as a target at all. The reason why the Qingfeng Shunhu has been reluctant to leave is that he is worried that he cannot resist the Qing Shuzi without his help. You can hear the words of Qingfeng Shunhu, but Jian Wushuang showed a confident smile on his face, and replied, God, please rest assured that although I am not the opponent of Qingzuzi for now, but he wants to kill me, not so easy. This. Qingfeng Shunhu looked at Jian Wushuang, a hesitation flashed on his face. He can see Jian Wushuang's confident smile on his face is not a fake. Okay then. Qingfeng Shunhu nodded his head. Now it is the moment of life and death. He doesn't have so much time to do his daughter gesture. Since Jian Wushuang made him leave, then he left. Jian Wushuang, take good care of yourself. If we can see you again in the future, we will make a happy talk. Qingfeng Shunhu took a deep look at Jian Wushuang and flew towards a mountain below the sky. Sure. Jian Wushuang nodded. After Qingfeng Shunhu left, Jian Wushuang took a deep breath, but there was a flash of murder in his eyes. His strength today is indeed inferior to Qing Shuzi, but this does not mean that he has no way to take Qing Shuzi. Qing Shuzi, since you are going to die with me, I have to prepare a surprise for you. Jian Wushuang's eyes were extremely cold, and he still had plans in his heart. Chapter 4158. Second more. Not far behind Jian Wushuang. Seeing that Qingfeng Shunhu and Jian Wushuang were separated and swept towards the surrounding void, Qing Shuzi only glanced slightly, but did not go after him. Indeed, his target is only Jian Wushuang. As for Qingfeng, he doesn't care. But chasing it all the way down, the smile on Qingzuzi's face has gradually disappeared, his brows are getting more and more tighter, How thick is this sword? Unparalleled power. Qing Zuzi's face was not very good-looking. According to his conjecture, the reason why Jian Wushuang's rapid increase in speed must have been the execution of some unique mystic skills, and that mystic skills should not be easy to perform, at least the power consumed should be its very huge. There is no doubt about it, otherwise why did Jian Wushuang burst into such a fast speed at the beginning? But he has been chasing nearly 2 hours behind him, and Jian Wushuang's speed has not slowed down at all. What is this concept? Well, I'll take a look at how long your divine power can support you. Qing Shuzi hummed coldly, his expression returned to apathy again. With God's guidance, he is not afraid of Jian Wushuang escaping, so it is not too urgent. In the blink of an eye, most of the time passed. For such a long period of time, Jian Wushuang has been performing the mystery of dragon extermination and burning his divine power. If it had been placed before, Jian Wushuang could not carry it for so long. But since the baptism of life, his deities have skyrocketed to a height of 68,000 miles. How immense is the power of such a huge body? Even if the burning of dragon mystery has been maintained for more than half a day now, his divine power has been consumed by less than 10%. Jian Wushuang kept rushing forward, but when he did know, he had already reached the most marginal area of the Tara ruins. Because it is relatively remote and there are few precious treasure opportunities, the strong man who is here to wander is almost no. Just as Jian Wushuang passed a mountain, his footsteps stopped. Almost. Jian's eyes flickered, and his body's lasing fell instantly, landing on this mountain. Stepping on the ground, Jian Wushuang looked up at the blood-colored arrow hanging above his head. This blood-colored arrow has become very thin, and by this calculation, Qing Zuzi should be quite far away from him. This is also the reason why he did not hesitate to burn and walk in the face of divine power. He wanted to keep Qing Shuzi as far away as possible, so that he could have more time to prepare. On the mountains, Jian Wushuang took a deep breath, sat down slowly, and closed his eyes. Immediately afterwards, sword-to-swords shot abruptly from his body, and then dived into the mountains like a ground dragon. At this moment, Jian Wushuang no longer suppresses the divine power in his body. Before fighting with Qing Shuzi, he has always controlled his divine power to be about 8,000 times that of ordinary practitioners, but now it is equivalent to 13 million ordinary practitioners. 1,500 times the power of God burst out. 13,500 times the strength of the divine power. With Jian Wushuang's understanding of Kendo, the perception of the universe's origins, swept wildly, and immediately under the control of Jian Wushuang's full of sword energy, ambush in this majestic mountain among. After entering into the mountains, these sword chi were all contained but not sent, as if waiting for someone's arrival quietly. 10 roads, 100 roads, 1,000 roads, 1,000 roads. Qing Shuzi, I hope you will like the surprise I gave you. Jian Wushuang closed his eyes slightly and pulled a smile on his face. About half an hour later, a figure of white robes just stepped in the void, step by step. His speed seemed unpleasant, but every step he took, he directly crossed 1,000 miles. Jian Wushuang, don't run away. Qing Shuzi stood with his hands in his hands, standing on the mountain, overlooking Jian Wushuang below with interest, like a cat playing with a mouse. He wasn't worried that Jian Wushuang would run away, so it wasn't slow down along the way. The sword sat cross-legged, only to hear Qing Zuzi's words, then he slowly opened his eyes. A fine light passed quickly through his eyes. Qing Shuzi, there isn't much resentment between us, why do you bite me? Jian Wushuang looked up at him and said lightly, hate. Qing Shuzi heard, as if he had heard some funny joke, and suddenly burst out laughing. When I am young and murderous, when do I need resentment? Whoever I want to die must die. Qing Zuzi's mouth also had a hint of pleasure and abuse. Jian Wushuang heard the words, his expression did not change, he nodded and said, okay. Jian Wushuang, you are a 4th-level master who can push me to this share. You are worthy of pride. If you give me some time, wait for you to break through to reach the 5th rank or become the ultimate master. Go there. You might be stronger than King Jotsai. Even me, when I meet you at that time, am afraid I can only escape, but unfortunately, now you are just an ant in front of me. Qing Shuzi shook his head, then 5 fingers with distinct bones, grasped the Excalibur at the waist. The sword is unparalleled, remember, this sword is frightened. Don't worry about it. Huh. Qing Shuzi suddenly drew his sword out of the sheath, a crescent moon sword orn, instantly folded from the void, and split it in front of the sword Wushuang. Facing a cold sword, Zhen Wushuang suddenly lowered his head and sighed. Next moment, he looked up sharply, his eyes full of murder. Qing Shuzi, it's you. Sword Qi, get up, boom. At this moment, the sky and the earth changed color instantly, and the whole mountain was like a landslide, making a loud noise. The earth began to crack, the sky began to change color, and a hint of cold sword rose up. Okay. Qing Shuzi raised an eyebrow, and a doubt flashed in his eyes. Cut. Along with Zhen Wushuang's deep and cold drink, this majestic mountain range burst instantly. A total of 300,000 swords have sprung up and covered the sky. At this moment, the void seemed to be torn, and a storm of sword gas was blown directly. What? In Qing Zuzi's furious eyes, these 300,000 sword Qi gathered together, like a long dragon swallowing the sun, hovering above the sky, blocking all the bright light, roaring towards Qing Shuzi to bite away. Huh. A total of 300,000 swords have been swept away. What kind of scene is that? It's dense, covering the sky, like the million swordsmen. And the sword unparalleled standing in the center of the 300,000 Daoqi sword Qi is like the sword lord in charge of killing power. These 300,000 sword Qi was condensed by the sword power of 12,700 times, and the explosion caused by it is enough to be the ultimate master in second. This is the great surprise that Zhen Wushuang prepared for Qing Shuzi. Chapter 415th Surprise, page 11, bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 4159. The first is more. Rumble. There was a thunder between heaven and earth. These 300,000 swords are like the dragons of the world and the snakes swallowing the sun, and they are severely chopped down towards the Qing Shuzi. Zhen Wushuang. Qing Zuzi's face changed for the first time, roaring loudly. Huh. The next moment, the 300,000 swords were hit Qing Shuzi. Dang 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 dang. Qing Shuzi raised his sword across, and the sharp sword gas hit his sword-stealing sword, making a sound of gold and iron, and sparks. However, Qing Shuzi only resisted less than 100,000 sword Qi, and the amazing cicada sword flew from his hands. Then more than 200,000 swords smashed into him without any hindrance. Like Wn Zhen's heart, Qing Zuzi's body shook like a sieve, making a dense muffled sound. After almost 3 breaths, the 300,000 swordsmanship completely disappeared. Zhen Wushuang stared at this scene until Qing Zuzi's body, like a ragbag, crossed a falling arc in the air and hit the ground fiercely, and he was only slightly relieved. He believes that even if he is an invincible Qing Zuzi in the ultimate domination, in the face of his strenuous effort and elaborate design, it will explode at a full strength of 13,000 times the strength of the divine power, and the magical power of the burning of the dragon destroys the magic to display 100,000 swordsmanship is definitely not much better. Time flies. The place where Qing Shuzi fell raised huge smoke, but Zhen Wushuang did not dare to take it lightly. After all, in addition to being the ultimate master of invincibility, Qing Shuzi was also the High Prince of the Universe, the top power 2 virtual temple. No one knows, the Taishu Temple sent him to Tailuo ruins this time, and prepared him what Xion Hole card. Ahem. Suddenly, there was a sound of coughing blood in the diffused smoke. Zhen Wushuang's heart sank. Sure enough, the 300,000 sword Qi was not enough to kill Qing Shuzi. The smoke gradually dispersed. I saw that the place where Qing Shuzi had fallen formed a huge pit that was 100 feet wide. Qing Shuzi stood up from the pit, and the whole man looked miserable. The white robe embroidered with the word Tai Shu on his body was completely broken, hanging on his body like a rotten strip, his hair was spread out, and Zhongjun's face was covered with blood. Indifferent to the appearance of a noble son, the wolf was trembling to the extreme. Sword. None. Double. Qing Zuzi gasped with a big mouth and stared at Zhen Wushuang, staring out the words Zhen Wushuang from his teeth. Huh. He hooked his waist, slowly moving forward, and then grabbed the cicada Excalibur slanting in front of him, Like the evil spirit crawling out of 9U hell, a horrible resentment and hatred from him he burst out. How much hasn't the breath weakened? Jian looked at this scene without expressions on both sides, but sighed in his heart. I was so strenuous and exhausted my magical preparations. I thought that even if I could not kill Qing Shuzi, at least it could cause Qing Shuzi to be badly damaged. However, although the Qing Shuzi looks extremely embarrassed, the breath on his body did not weaken at all. After all, it's still too low. If he is not dominated by the 4th series, but has broken through to reach the 5th series, he believes that the move just now should be enough to make Qing Shuzi deadly. It's almost. I really planted it in the hands of a 4th-level master. Qing Shuzi stared at Jian Wushuang with a pair of eyes, furious in his heart. At the same time, there was a hint of concealment. If it hadn't been for the Taishu temple this time before he came, he had given him a life-saving jade that was enough to withstand the power of dominating the limits. Maybe this time, he would really capsize in the gutter. The killing move just now killed 300,000 horrific swords and swords. If he totally relied on his own strength, although he could survive, it would definitely be hit hard. And once it was severely damaged, he could hardly recover in a short time, then he could only temporarily withdraw from the Taro ruins. Now, although he kept himself from being harmed by the murderous move just now, the Taishu shrine prepared for him, the life-saving jade specially used in the Taro ruins, was used. Qing Shuzi looked down at the 8-piece diamond-shaped jade pendant in his hand. An unprecedented killing intention could no longer be suppressed. Sword unparalleled, I will smash your bones inch by inch, draw your soul out of the body, and suffer from the scorching of the sword all day, Qing Shuzi resentfully said. The sword has no two-sided indifference. He didn't even look at Qing Shuzi more, but looked at the surrounding void. That void may be due to the bursting of 300,000 sword qi at the same time, and the impact has not been known when it has been distorted. Gradually, there was a hidden space crack that slowly emerged. Crack in space. Jian was eyes narrowed. Under the impact of Genqi in this Taro ruins, a space crack suddenly appeared. Where does this space crack lead? Jian Wushuang, a full 50 Chaos era, you are the first person to force me into this field, very good, really good. Qing Shuzi looked cold as a poisonous snake, and then took a deep breath, seems to make a decision, his eyebrows gradually twisted into a Sichuan word, saying one word at a time, too much forbidden surgery, God is angry, boom. All of a sudden, Qing Zuzi's hair spread all over his head, and a fierce wind exploded around him. And Qing Zuzi's whole momentum began to skyrocket. In a blink of an eye, it has reached a whole new level. Suddenly, the might of terror was like the tide, and the mad swordsman oppressed. Jian Wushuang has also fought against this Qing Zuzi after the show of the primitive universe, and also fought with equal fanfare. Although King Zuzi's prestige was overbearing, it was not enough to make Jian Wushuang scared. But now, Jian Wushuang felt a sense of suffocation under this might. This is it. Jian Wushuang trembled, and his eyes were inconceivable for the first time. If Qing Zuzi's previous strength was a grade lower than Jujiawang, then he now feels that sword is unparalleled and will never be inferior to Jujiawang in the peak period. The Qing Zuzi relied on the forbidden technique, and even had the level of Ju Kaiwang's superior combat power in a short time. Jian Wushuang, you really it. Qing Shuzi said coldly, only he knew how much it cost him to use this too virtual forbidden technique. It can be said that Qing Shuzi has desperately wanted to be able to slay the sword unparalleled. Call out. Qing Zuzi's voice had not yet landed, and he had disappeared instantly. Chapter 459 The Space Rift, page 11, bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 4160. Second more. Escape. Now, I'm definitely not an opponent. Jian Wushuang's thoughts turned. He was never a man of arrogance. He didn't think that only the 4th-level self dominated the realm, and he could compete with the current Qing Shuzi. Can you escape? Zizi. At this moment, a virtual shadow instantly condensed before Jian was two sides, and then, Jian Wushuang saw that Qing Shuzi had already lifted the stunned sword and stabbed at his head fiercely. Too fast. This sword, almost reaching the end of the sword, could not react at all and went to defend. At this time of crisis, Jian Wushuang finally used his whole card. Talented, amazing life. Suddenly, a supreme coercion from the life level came suddenly. This kind of oppression from life level ignores the realm. Even though Qingzuzi can now compete with the King of Nine Calamities, it is also affected by the shock of life. At this moment, as if time had produced a momentary freeze, Qingzuzi's body, which was struck forward, actually froze instantly. However, Jian Wushuang took the opportunity to storm back without hesitation, turned around and plunged into the void crack. Click, click. The field of life deterrence just broke up after only holding it for less than half a time. Qingzuzi's eyes were cold, looking at the void crack in which Jian Wushuang penetrated, and his voice was indifferent. Jian Wushuang, do you think I can escape into the void crack? Can I do nothing? Qingzuzi stepped on, and shot straight into the void crack. Jian Wushuang seemed to have passed through a black bottomless passage. When his eyes lighted up, the whole man suddenly stopped. A towering black palace emerged in front of him. In this palace, Long Fei Feng Wu is engraved with two big characters Taro. These two large characters are drawn like gold hooks, with sharp pen angles, and an arrogant sword shoot out. Here is. Jian Wushuang trembled with shock in his eyes. If he didn't guess it wrong, it is very likely that this is the second floor of the Taro relics mentioned by the King of the Wind, the real hiding place of Taro treasures. When Jian Wushuang was going to walk into this palace, he suddenly felt something, and turned his head sharply to look back. Zizi. I saw a twist in the void, a white robe figure, falling from the void. Qingzuzi. Jian was eyes narrowed for a moment. This man really was a ghost. Jian Wushuang, I said, you can't escape. Qingzuzi sneered. Let's die. The next moment, when Qingzuzi was carrying his whole body of power, intending to slash the sword Wushuang, his face suddenly became ugly. He found that his whole body power was as if it was being suppressed by a supreme power, and he couldn't achieve 10%. What's the matter? Qingzuzi noticed the existence of the palace at that moment, and his expression was suddenly stunned. Qingzuzi, if I'm not mistaken, this is the real treasure of the Taro ruins. We might as well stop here and look for opportunities here. When we get out of here, there is a right and wrong between us. And solve, how? Jian Wushuang said lightly. The real treasure of the Taro ruins? Qingzuzi heard his face clouded for a while, and then hummed coldly, sword unparalleled, then I will let you live for a while, then come back to take back your life. In fact, he wanted to kill Jian Wushuang first, but the problem was that once he came here, his strength was greatly suppressed, and he could not achieve 10%. In this case, he could not kill Jian Wushuang at all. Naturally, you can only give up temporarily. When Jian Wushuang heard a faint smile, he stopped talking and walked step by step towards the black palace-shaped palace. The palace is very large, with a total of 5 floors, and a winding promenade continues to meander upwards. Flip-flop. Flip-flop. The sound of Jian Wushuang's footsteps echoing in the silent palace seemed a little dull. Cosmic source stones. Lots of cosmic source stones. Just then, the ecstatic voice of Qingzuzi came from the other side of the roundabout corridor. Jian Wushuang stared at it. In the corner of the first floor, countless cosmic source rocks were stacked together to form 10 magnificent hills. The cosmic source stone of each hill is at least tens of millions. Raosha is a sword unmatched. Looking at these 10 hills piled with cosmic source stones, he couldn't help turning his eyes red. Immediately, Qingzuzi grabbed a cosmic source stone. Jian Wushuang was also unwilling to show weakness. He took a large hand and took a shot towards another cosmic source stone. However, before the two of them actually encountered the cosmic source stone, a light blue halo suddenly swung away from the hill where the cosmic source stone was stacked, and bounced off the giant hands of Jian Wushuang and Qingzuzi. Can't take it. Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed, his eyes flashing. He pondered slightly that the power of restraint was everywhere in this palace. If you want to get the contents of this palace, you may first have to control the palace and lift the power of restraint. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang's eyes revealed a touch of enlightenment, and his footsteps quickly moved towards the higher part of the palace. The Qingzuzi, as if he didn't believe in evil, madly grabbed at the 10 cosmic source rocks and made a loud noise. Jian Wushuang shook his head when he saw it, his footsteps never stopped, and he kept walking up the winding corridor. Second floor, the third floor. Fourth floor. The sword Wushuang is moving faster and faster, where the second layer contains a large number of rule treasures, and the third layer is a variety of magic drugs. As you go upward, the contents of each layer become more and more. The fourth layer is a quiet suspension. Author of an ancient book. Tai Luo Jian Dian, an overbearing and powerful breath came out from this ancient book. Jian Wushuang looked at this ancient book, and could not help but feel a sense of worship. This is the breath left by Tai Luo Supreme. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang tried to reach out and ingest this Tara sword classic. A stronger ban has bounced back. Jian Wushuang took a few steps back to suppress the writhing blood. Sure enough, the things in this palace can only be seen, but they can't be taken. If you want to get these treasures, you must first find a way to get control of this palace. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang continued to go up. After half an hour, Jian Wushuang reached the 5th floor. It was a closed door. 2 giant statues holding swords stood in front of the door. Without any hesitation, Jian Wushuang reached out and pushed the door open. Boom! Countless fumes were lifted, and an ancient cloud of air was thrown out of the door. The dust sealed the doors of hundreds of chaos periods and was pushed open by the sword unparalleled. Jian Wushuang's expression was deep, holding in his right hand the Wubing divine sword's hilt, which straddled his waist, and strode in. Chapter 4161. The first is more. On the 5th floor, there is a huge hall, just like the palace in the dynasty. It is solemn and solemn. The orbs are glowing with faint blue light, hanging on the hall, which illuminates the hall somewhat mysteriously and hazy. Sword Wu looked straight to the deepest part of the hall, his eyes flashing. There is a huge throne. A figure wearing a dark gold and black robe was sitting quietly on the throne. The figure lowered his head, and the dark black hair of his legs was scattered on the ground, making it hard to see his face. Under this throne, there are still 6 corpses exposed in frightened faces, with open mouths. This is... Jian Wushuang's pupils shrank, his right hand was turned over, and an ancient sheepskin roll appeared. Jian Wushuang lowered his head and looked up at the sheepskin roll. On this sheepskin roll, there were 7 human faces on the front page, which were portraits of the King of the Wind 10,000 years ago. Jian Wushuang put away the sheepskin roll and looked again at the 6 dry corpses under the throne. These 6 dead corpses are the 6 team members who followed the chasing after the Wind King 10,000 years ago and came to this Taro ruins. Jian Wushuang looked at this scene, and for some reason, a strong cold chill surged in his heart. Instinctively, Jian Wushuang intends to step back. Click, click. But at this moment, the figure in the purple and black robe sitting on the throne slowly raised his head. In an instant, Jian Wushuang's sweat and fur all stood up, and an extremely scary thrill came from his heart. This thrill was like a man's back, and Jian Wushuang felt like he was facing death. On the throne, the figure slowly raised his head, revealing an old face. When Jian Wushuang saw this face, his pupils suddenly shrank. This face, he could not be more familiar. It is one of the goals of their visit to Tai Luo Ruins, King of Wind. King of the Wind, you are not dead. Jian Wushuang surprised. Yeah, how could I be dead? The King of the Wind said with a hoarse voice, smirking. Jian Wushuang sank in his heart. Somehow, this chasing the Wind King gave him an extremely weird feeling. He stepped back a few steps, preparing to send a message back to the Temple of Life, to convey the news that the King of the Wind was still alive. However, the result of this rumor was to make Jian Wushuang's face slightly changed. Something has stopped. Here is like an invisible force, completely cut off the communication between him and the Palace of Life. My child, are you afraid? Why step back? The King of the Wind looked at Jian Wushuang with a strange expression. Child. Jian Wushuang frowned. This title should obviously not be the title of the King of the Wind. And he also found that while the King of the Wind was speaking, there was a vaguely invisible power over him. This kind of power was mild and desirable, as if it really came from his father. Nothing. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and tried to keep himself calm. He can now be absolutely sure that something happened to the King of Wind. King of the Wind, what's going on with them? Jian Wushuang slightly pointed his jaw, pointed at his 6 dry corpses under his chin, and asked lightly. They? Who knows? The King of the Wind shook his head, then stared straight at Jian Wushuang, his voice muffled. My child, come here quickly, I don't like to talk across this distance. Jian Wushuang heard his face expressionless, but he couldn't help but sneer. Just as he was about to step out of the gate of the palace, a cold snoring sounded suddenly from the door. Immediately after, Jian Wushuang saw Qing Shuzi and strode in. Huh? Is anyone else here? Qing Shuzi saw the King of the Wind sitting on the throne, and raised his eyebrows suddenly. Here is another one. On the throne, the King of Wind saw the stepping Qing Shuzi, and immediately laughed lowly. Vaguely, carefully paying attention to the sword of warrior King Wushuang, it seems to see a smile and greed hidden in the smile of warrior King. Old guy, what are you laughing at? Qing Shuzi looked cold, and then he snorted, and then Feng turned. Old guy, I ask you, do you know how to get the things in this hall? The King of Winds heard the words and smiled slightly. You want? Crap, I don't want me to ask you what. Qing Shuzi answered with a smirk. Okay, boy, come here, I'll tell you. The chasing Wind King smiled more and more kindly. However, the anxiety in Jian Wushuang's heart grew stronger. Pretend to be a ghost. Qing Shuzi also had a hint of vigilance in his heart. He took a closer look at the King of the Wind in front of him. Although the feeling of the King of the Wind was very strange, he could see that the King of the Wind did not seem to have anything strength. After a moment of groaning, Qing Shuzi raised his head again. You can't make any waves. Qing Shuzi slowly walked towards the King of Wind. Yeah, that's it, boy, you just walked over. I'll tell you how to get the treasure here. The voice of the King of the Wind revealed a deep desire, even the lips, because excited, looked a little trembling. Slap. Qing Shuzi stepped in front of the King of the Wind, looked down at him condescendingly, and said with anger, Say, how can you get the treasure here? Okay, you lower your head closer, and I'll tell you right away. The King of the Wind's voice revealed a strange magic. Qing Zuzi's complexion changed slightly, but before he took any action, he saw that the King of the Wind raised his hand suddenly and pressed it towards his head. Qing Shuzi wanted to avoid, but found in horror that his movement was obstructed by an invisible obstacle, which eventually led him to fail to hide. The palm of the King of the Wind was still pressed on his skull. Suddenly, countless blood and divine power were sucked out along the arm of the King of the Wind, and quickly entered the body of the King of the Wind. Qing Zuzi's body dried up at a speed that was visible to the naked eye, making a terrible scream. Huh! Qing Shuzi tremblingly held the scary cicada sword on his waist, and swept up fiercely. Huh! However, this amazing cicada sword that is enough to cut through the sky was just caught by the King of the Wind and gently grasping it. Later, in Qing Zuzi's horrified eyes, the scared cicada sword was opened by the King of the Wind and ate it inch by inch. Click, click, click. Just a few breaths away, this amazing cicada sword disappeared into the mouth of the King of the Wind. Slap. Qing Shuzi fell to the ground, and the whole man turned into a dead body, still holding a huge terror on his face. A generation of suns, the invincible existence of the ultimate master, died. Hee. The King of the Wind released his hand and let out a low, weird smile, which was extremely strange. Chapter 4162. The second is even more. This sudden change made Jian Wushuang surprised. Escape. Jian Wushuang's alarm bell rose, and he did not hesitate at all. Qing Shuzi instantly died and became a dead body, plus the same 6 dead bodies on the ground, so that Jian Shuangshuang understands that there is definitely a big problem with the chasing Wind King. However, just as Jian Wushuang was about to escape from the hall, the heavy door closed with a whisper. Immediately afterwards, I saw the hair dragged by the King of the Wind to the ground, all floating up, like a sharp sword, and shot towards the sword. On the originally old face of the King of Wind, as if faded, in a short moment, it actually turned into another turquoise and rotten face. His eyes burst into pieces, His eyes became dark, as if there was a strange fire beating. Clang! A bundle of hair, like a serpent, shot at Jian Wushuang fiercely. Jian Wushuang jumped quickly to avoid it. The bundle of hair hit the ground where he was before, and a small pit was hit on the ground. No. You are not the King of the Wind. Jian Wushuang's face changed wildly. The King of the Wind? This body is called the King of the Wind. The body of the King of the Wind slowly rose from the throne, and his throat sounded completely harsh, unlike humans. At the same time, an evil hegemony reached the extreme of the sword, erupting from him, setting off a terrifying space storm. You can call me Taro Sword Demon, or you can call me Taro Sword. King of the Wind approached Jian Wushuang step by step, his hair floated, his face rotten, his eyes hollow and deep, like a messenger from hell. Bunches of hair shot fiercely towards Jian Wushuang, and Jian Wushuang's Wu-Weiss Excalibur slashed on her hair, and she could only splash a string of sparks, which could not be cut off. After avoiding 100 hair bundles, at last, Jian Wushuang couldn't avoid it. He was directly hit by a bundle of hair and immediately swept up, taking the distance, and directly binding Jian Wushuang into a mule. Jian Wushuang's whole body was surging and he was struggling madly, but no matter how he struggled, he couldn't get rid of the shackles of this hair. At this time, King of the Wind had already come to Jian Wushuang. He stretched out 5 fingers and pressed it against the head of Jian Wushuang. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang faced a dead end. It's bad. Jian's face became frightened. The King of the Wind is smiling strangely, pressing his palm directly on the head of Jian Wushuang. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang only felt his whole body power, and with the vitality, all began to be quickly sucked away by the King of Wind. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's 3 great talents, all kinds of unscrupulous mysteries, seemed to be sealed, and could not exert the slightest strength. The palm of the King of the Wind is like a black hole that devours everything, constantly devouring the vitality and power of the sword unparalleled. What? Suddenly, the King of the Wind stopped for a moment, as if something had been found, and an interesting tapping sound was made in his mouth. This junior's divine power is so majestic, it is unbelievable. Also, he is obviously the master of a 4th series, but his perception of the laws of the universe is enough to be as ordinary as the Supreme. It must be the most arrogant in the world, right? It's a pity to die here. The King of the Wind shouted and shook his head with a tongue in his tongue. Although his mouth was saying words of admiration, the coldness and greed on his face did not decrease by half. At this moment, he is constantly absorbing the magical power and vitality of Jian Wushuang. Naturally, he can see the depth of Jian Wushuang's divine power. As for Jian Wushuang's perception of the laws of the universe, he does not know how the King of the Wind sees it. The King of the Wind continued to move, and began to devour the vitality and power of Jian Wushuang. Under this great devouring force, Jian Wushuang's eyes gradually darkened, and then slowly closed. Just then, Jian Wushuang's body armor swelled with a bright light, and a frosty cold eyebrow appeared suddenly in front of him. It was exactly the blood guard who stayed in Jian Wushuang's armor. Body imprint. Bold. He Fangren, dare to hurt my disciples? Bloodwave Supreme Shu Ying stretched out a finger, carrying the power of destroying the stars, toward the King of the Wind. Extreme power? The King of Winds pursed his eyes, but made a dismissive smirk. If your deity is here, I still don't want to miss 3 points, just a protective mark on the body, dare to be arrogant. Get out of the way. The King of Jufeng's face flashed sharply, a dark hair from behind his head floating up, just like a javelin, pierced the imprint of the supreme protection of Bloodwave instantly. Banging. Bloodwave Supreme's phantom collapsed piece by piece. Well, when this seat was alive, you waited for the Supreme to not even let this seat shot, dare to stop me now? The King of Contempt sneered sneer, and the rotten face looked a little embarrassed. The palm of his hand continued to rest on the sword's head, countless vitality and divine power, devoured and sucked by him. The King of the Wind felt the vitality and divine power coming from his arm, and his face was filled with pleasure. Just when Jian Wushuang was about to turn into a corpse, the action of King of the Wind stopped for a moment, and a look of shock flashed on his face. How is it possible? This junior's divine strength is even more than 10,000 times. Even the legendary perfect life, the innate advantage is developed to the extreme. The divine strength cannot exceed 10,000 times, is it? The King of Winds was shocked, and there was a shock in his eyes. He is a remnant thought of the tyrants who died before the death of Tai Luo Supreme, or, as the current sword spirit of Tai Luo Excalibur, has extraordinary insight. He knows a lot about special life. At the same time, he also knows that in the strength of divine strength, the strongest perfect life will develop the innate advantage to the extreme, and it has only the strength of divine strength equivalent to 10,000 times of ordinary practitioners. But now, while absorbing sword warriors, he clearly senses the strength of sword warriors is far stronger than the ordinary 4th rank master, absolutely more than 10,000 times. More than 10,000 times the strength of the divine power. Isn't the life level of this junior higher than the perfect life? Ha 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 ha, the sky will never end. I am Tu Luo, give me such a good fortune. The King of Wind, or Tai Luo Genling, an ecstasy burst into ugly face. At this moment, he changed his mind. He no longer wanted to kill Jian Wushuang, but he took it away. He is going to inherit this talent that is amazing to the extreme, and his life level is far beyond that of perfect progression. Capture the soul. The King of the Wind sighed, and then a scene of terror appeared. Chapter 4163. The first is more. I saw that starting from the position of the Eyebrow King, the flesh was constantly torn, and the dark golden Excalibur sword pointed out from the position of his eyebrow. Sword tip, sword body, hilt. However, within a few breaths, a whole body was dark gold, with numerous mysterious road patterns on the blade, and a vertical-eyed long sword sticking out of the sword's body. This is the Tara sword that millions of chaos prehistoric dazzled the universe. This Taro sword is full of feelings of demons smelting evil spirits. It has been transformed into a magic sword after millions of contaminations left by the Chaos G Taro Supreme. Call out. The sword tip of Tai Luo magic sword was slightly rotated, and then it was stabbed slowly towards Jian Wushuang's brows. The body of the King of the Wind dried up at a speed that was visible to the naked eye, turned into a dry body, and finally dissolved into a pool of blood. Click, click. This Taro Excalibur entered the intimacy of the sword unparalleled, and after a moment, the Taro Excalibur completely entered the body of the sword. Strangely, Jian Wushuang's eyebrows were located without any wounds or blood. The next moment, Jian Wushuang's eyes suddenly opened. The pupil in his eyes disappeared and was replaced by a hollow void and depth. Jian Wushuang? Very good, starting today, I am the sword magic sword. The corner of sword Wu Shuang opened his mouth, sending out a low, weird laughter, which echoed in the large hall, and looked extremely eerie. He floated in the void and took a photo with his right hand. The countless hairs that stuck in the ground like javelins suddenly turned into countless black lines, all of which fell into the sword without hands. Immediately after, he stepped down from the void and felt the body carefully, pulling a satisfied smile on his face. With this body, I am enough to set foot on the top of the universe again, even stronger than the last life. But this body is too weak now. I have to think of a way to transform this body to become stronger only if it is achieved, otherwise it is a violent celestial thing. Jian Shuang murmured to himself, then reached out and pulled out the Wu weapon sword, looked at his head and shook his head. Then, let's start by strengthening this sword. Sword Wu Shuang stepped into the 3rd floor of the hall, where there are countless arable rules and treasures and refining materials. Well, the evil dragon's fangs, the chaotic cold iron, the cosmic geocenter, the essence of the stars. One piece is enough to place the sensational materials of the extreme refiner outside, and they are shot into the hands of sword warriors. If you look closely, there are at least 100 pieces. Sword Wu Shuang then nodded slightly, cross-legged, and sat down cross-legged, took out the Wu crying Excalibur, and whispered, refine. In that moment, a black fire of God condensed in front of him and burned the void. A game that belongs to Jian Wushuang's biggest ever, it has begun, inside the main hall on the 2nd floor of the Tara ruins. Sword Wu Shuang sat cross-legged, in front of him, a cluster of black magical fires burned the void, and in that magical fire, Wu Wei's magical sword continued to melt and reshape. Pieces of superb materials. Although it was Jian Wushuang or Qing Shuzi who could see it before, they couldn't take it away, but now they are grabbed by Jian Zhenshuang from the second floor of the hall and thrown into the black magic fire. Among them, it was then refined into Wu Weeping Sword to improve the rank. Time flies, years go by. 100 years passed. It's done. Sword warriors spread out 5 fingers, and the Wu crying Excalibur suspended in the air suddenly issued a clear whistle and shot backwards into his hands. Jian Wushuang stretched out his finger and bounced on the blade. A moment ago, Wu Xing's sword trembled hundreds of millions of times continuously. Under this tremor, the void seemed to tremble. Although this sword has not yet broken through to the level of the supreme divine soldier, it has also reached the limit of the supreme rule of treasures. When it comes to power, it is 1,000 times more powerful than before. Sword warrior's pale on the strange face, a smile of satisfaction smirked, and a big wave of his hand immediately put the Wu weapon sword into the ring of heaven and earth. The next step is to elevate this body. A slight contemplation flickered in the eyes of sword warriors, and he turned the ring of Chengkuan at will, and a fascination flashed on his face. Fruit of the rule of Chinese goods. Wait, is this 9-leaf sword grass? There was a smile of joy on the face of Jiang Wushuang. For him, a Taoist rule of Taoism is nothing. In the third-tier palace, there are more than one Taoist rule of Taoism, but the 9-leaf sword grass is different. 9-leaf sword grass, but the magic medicine of countless sword cultivation dreams. It contains the understanding of the origin of Kendo. It is the beginning of the chaos of the universe. The most primitive law of Kendo has an incredible magical effect for any sword practitioner. I didn't expect this junior to have such a chance, let alone, then I will first improve the origin of the Kendo universe. Sword Wushuang swallowed the 9-leaf sword grass and the Chinese rule of Dao fruit and started a new round promotion. At the same time, the Temple of Life. The Supreme Temple where Bloodwave Supreme is located. Presumptuous. The Bloodwave Supreme, who was closing her eyes, was suddenly opened, her face flashed with anger. Bloodwave, what happened? Beside him, the Great Axe frowned and asked. He is the best friend of dozens of Chaos Ages, and he has rarely seen such annoyance, and his heart is confused. Sword unparalleled, something happened. Bloodwave Supreme said slowly. What are you talking about? Jushen Supreme was shocked, but he knew how much Bloodwave Supreme valued and looked forward to Jian Wushuang, even himself. A perfect life with such high talents and incredible potential, the Temple of Life has never been seen since its creation. I left the imprint of the shield on Sword Warrior's armor, and it was erased. Bloody Supreme's face was gloomy, and a trace of icy murderousness overflowed from his eyes. The giant axe heard a flash of light, and he knew the mark of the bodyguard that the Bloodwave had left in the swordless warframe. It can be said that with the mark, no one except the Supreme can hurt the sword unparalleled. This is why the Supreme Master of Bloodwave dared to let Jian Wushuang go to the terrestrial ruins in the realm of the 4th level. But now, the Supreme Bloodwave told him that the mark of the Protector had been wiped away. What is that concept? In the ruins of Morphinatello, there is a supreme failure? Taking a deep breath, the giant axe said in a deep voice, Bloodwave, the mark of the Protector has been erased, does not mean that Jian Wushuang has fallen. We might as well go to the Temple of Life's lamp to see the life left by Jian Wushuang. Did the magic lamp go out? You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,